Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Zanpakutō is too competitive, he opened Bankai by himself. Chapter 61. The speed of repair is unexpectedly fast. Kuretsuchi Mayuri scanned the city below, however, the remaining spirit particles in the air revealed a great battle. He did not know where to take out an instrument that looked like a needle, shaking in the air, as if collecting information. Reiatsu, Manos Grande, grade strength 83. Strange spiritual nature, never seen before. There was a hint of interest in Kuretsuchi Mayuri's yellow pupils, it's really worth researching. And many more. What is this? Kuretsuchi Mayuri, who was originally obsessed with collecting spiritual seeds, suddenly froze, and his movements were also stiff. This Reiatsu. His eyes shone with excitement, like a hungry beast that has found its prey. There was even a green glow in the yellow pupils. What a wonderful presence, what a solid structure. I've never seen such a degree of spiritual concentration. Want to find this Reiatsu's. Kuretsuchi Mayuri, immersed in the research findings, did not realize that there was an extra person beside him. Moyu looked at the mumbling guy in front of him with a strange face. From the outside, he was crazy, neurotic, with all kinds of words that he couldn't understand. From Reiatsu, the texture is strong, far surpassing most Shinigami. If nothing else, it should be Kuretsuchi Mayuri. But why does it feel a bit similar to Mikami Seiki, with an air of naivety inside and out? Haha, what a delightful discovery. Wait, who are you? Kuretsuchi Mayuri finally realized that there was one more person beside her. Shinigami. The guy, with one eye wide open, carefully identified Moyu's identity. Kuchiki Moyu, stationed in Karakura town Shinigami, is in charge of the present city in the three spirits of the radius. Only then did Moyu realize that Kuretsuchi Mayuri was wearing a single lens on his eye, making him look even weirder. The Kuchiki family, hehe. Kuretsuchi Mayuri finally remembered the present-day information provided by his subordinates at the time of departure. Responsible for the Sanlingli around Karakura town. Wait, that means. His eyes widened suddenly, he opened his palm suddenly, and grabbed Moyu's arm. However, the combat level of Shinigami like Kuretsuchi Mayuri is obviously no different from that of Zale Aporo. Before it touched Moyu's arm, a finger was pressed on his forehead. At the fingertips, the thunder light danced. The breath of death enveloped Kuretsuchi Mayuri in an instant. Feel sorry. Moyu looked calm and said indifferently, I hate when people touch me. For the safety of each other, it is better to keep a certain distance. Kuretsuchi Mayuri, the great scientist of Seraite, the technical research and development personnel second only to Urahara Kazuki. Possesses countless weird and peculiar inventions, and is quite accomplished in the study of the soul. Its methods are as many as they are ranked among the Seraite. For this kind of guy, Moyu has always been more vigilant. Dealing with him, if you are a little careless, you may find your way. Even Ishida Uryu, who won the frontal battle with him, was implanted with surveillance bacteria by him. This kind of unpredictable method really makes people have to be careful. Cold sweat rolled down Kuretsuchi Mayuri's eye sockets. The atmosphere gradually became tense. Lightning arcs flickered and made a crackling sound. Even though he wasn't attacked, Kuretsuchi Mayuri could still feel the tingling on his skin. He was shocked and his pupils shrank suddenly. Obviously, Moyu's strength is somewhat unbelievable. Kuchiki Moyu, who is not even the vice captain, does not seem to lose to those captains in terms of strength. Even, far beyond, Kuretsuchi Mayuri maintained the current posture, not daring to make any changes. Because he could see that Moyu in front of him was definitely not a good stubble. From Moyu, he smelled something of the same kind. Back in the nest of maggots, Kuretsuchi Mayuri had seen too many crazy guys. However, the young man in front of him was obviously more dangerous than those guys. Kuretsuchi Mayuri believes that if he dares to resist, the other party will definitely dare to kill him. Mr. Moyu. Even if he was threatened with death, this guy still had a smile on his face. We met for the first time, the captain of the 12th Division, Kuretsuchi Mayuri. Seeing that he finally returned to normal state, Moyu also let go of his head. The thunder light dissipated, and Kuretsuchi Mayuri became more courageous. I came to this world this time mainly because of the remaining Reiatsu that was sent to the Technology Development Bureau some time ago. Hearing this, Moyu frowned slightly, realizing this guy's purpose. Zale Aporo is Ijuka's Arankar, his own Reiatsu, is of great research value. Scientists like Kuretsuchi Mayuri, who are obsessed with the research of various new technologies, will naturally not let go of any novelty. Seeing that Moyu was silent, Kuretsuchi Mayuri grinned and raised his voice slightly. So, can I request a copy of Where is Mr. Moyu's Reiatsu? Think twice. Moyu still didn't draw Zanpakutō after all, gave this guy a few blows. Anyway, the opponent is also the captain of the 12th division. Although Kuretsuchi Mayuri's strength was suppressed by 80% because of the limited spirit seal. But considering the identity of the other party, if he was really killed, it would be a mess. However, this guy's request is really outrageous. Reiatsu or something doesn't matter to Moyu. As long as it was a normal guy, he would not refuse this request. But what if the person who made the request was Kuretsuchi Mayuri? One of the most dangerous guys on Saraite's face right now. For Moyu, the level of danger is second only to Zaraki Kenpachi. As for Aizen, he's not on the same level anymore. Give Reiatsu to this guy and who knows what dangerous stuff he'll create. Don't even think about it. Moyu refused without hesitation. Although I don't know what Captain Kuretsuchi Mayuri is thinking. But for my own safety, you should give up this dangerous idea. Hearing this, the corners of Kuretsuchi Mayuri's mouth raised into a crazy smile. Sarah, I see. Moyu was a little surprised by his reaction. Kuretsuchi Mayuri, shouldn't he be the kind of guy who will do whatever it takes to achieve his goals? Why would you give up so easily? His abnormal behavior made Moyu even more concerned. It does not matter. Kuretsuchi Mayuri stared at Moyu with eyes fixed, and there was a hint of madness in his smile. I believe that one day, Mr. Moyu, you will eventually realize my kindness. Looking at the mentally ill Kuretsuchi Mayuri in front of him, Moyu shuddered in his heart. Aware of kindness? Are you saying I'll be psychopath too? Okay, Captain Kuretsuchi Mayuri. There was a bit of coldness in Moyu's voice. If you have any official duties to perform, please speed up the efficiency. I don't have so much time to chat with you here. Hearing this, Kuretsuchi Mayuri was stunned for a moment, and immediately spread his hands. His pale complexion and weird nails showed his essence of a mental patient to the fullest. Arankar, Espada, Special Reiatsu. His fingers were like twisted branches, showing a strange posture. In this world, it is also a huge treasure house. Mr. Moyu, I need all the data of the day's battle. This is an order from the superior Shinigami to the subordinate Shinigami. Facing this guy who perverted again, Moyu picked his ears impatiently. He didn't understand what he had done wrong. First met a Hawako Mundo pervert Zale Aporo, and later a Saraite pervert Kurosaki Mayuri. In short, I just didn't meet a good person. Seeing his disdainful look, although Kuretsuchi Mayuri was angry in his heart, he couldn't vent it. The reason why he said such a remark was entirely in consideration of Moyu's status as a direct descendant of the Kuchiki family. The Kuchiki family, one of the 5 nobles of the Soul Society, is a model of all Shinigami, and it is their duty to maintain and implement the rules of the Soul Society. The subordinate Shinigami cannot refuse the orders of the superior Shinigami. This is one of the rules of the Soul Society. Kuretsuchi Mayuri. Moyu looked at this nervous guy lightly, and said calmly, you want to use the identity of the Kuchiki family to restrain me, isn't it a bit too much for granted? Although I am the 3rd seat in the 4th division, I need to obey the orders of the captain-level Shinigami. But don't forget, this is the real world. Sure enough, from the beginning to the end, I shouldn't have any hopes for this guy. Is that so? On Kuretsuchi Mayuri's black and white face, there was a tricky smile. It seems that I can only drive some other guys. Moyu lowered his eyes slightly and said, Mikami Seiki will tell you in detail what he saw. However, I'm just one subordinate. You should know what I mean. After all, he turned and left. Seeing the figure casting shunpo in the air, Kuretsuchi Mayuri's smile became brighter and brighter, so bright that it made one's heart chill. It's really all Reiatsu to be desired. Back at the warehouse with Kuretsuchi Mayuri, Moyu dumped Mikami Seiki to him. For information about the problem, let Mikami Seiki describe it. With Kuretsuchi Mayuri, he doesn't want to get too involved. As for some of the purposes in Kuretsuchi Mayuri's mind, Moyu can also guess one or two. Since the activation of cheat, Reiatsu's practice progress has been at the forefront of all abilities. No way. In fact, it was because the strong men he encountered were outrageous one by one on Reiatsu. Any one of them is at the captain level. The oppression from the outside world, the cultivation of fighting spirit, and even now, Moyu's Reiatsu level has reached a level that even he himself cannot estimate. However, the only thing he can be sure of is, in the face of those real boss-level existences, he still has a big gap. However, when Reiatsu's potential was discovered, everything was different. Like that white thunder. Oh, I understand now. Kuretsuchi Mayuri took a pen and paper out of nowhere and wrote on it. Anything else to add? Mikami Seiki shook his head timidly. He, who had never even been afraid of death, was inexplicably frightened when he faced this strange man in front of him. It's as if some people are born with a fear of those snakes and insects. Avoidance from physiological instinct. Sarah, let's be like this for now. Looking at the record in hand, Kuretsuchi Mayuri is not very satisfied. From Mikami Seiki's perspective, he didn't get much useful information. Also, this guy almost made Moyu his god after the fight. The records of his remarks are almost overwhelmingly in the direction of Moyu. Under such circumstances, there is no reference value at all. Throughout the article, there are only 3 sentences that are useful. Moyu made a shot, and the opponent was second-handed, so there was nothing to say. Kuretsuchi Mayuri raised his finger and tapped his temple hard, making a bang. Its expression gradually became crazy and deteriorated. It seems that we need to change our thinking to make an inquiry. Kuretsuchi Mayuri twisted his neck and turned his head 270 degrees. Trouble, let me tell you from your point of view how I felt when I met Manos Grande. Seeing the strange behavior that was completely out of human form in front of him, a trace of fear flashed in the depths of Mikami Seiki's pupils, and he subconsciously said, that Manos Grande's Reiatsu is strong. When we first met, I was so oppressed by his Reiatsu that I could hardly move and completely lost my ability to think. Moyu looked at Mikami Seiki, who was almost endless, with a thoughtful look in his eyes. Kuretsuchi Mayuri did not show this weird mentality just now on a whim. He once transformed his body into various hidden weapons and devices. For him, his own research is the best weapon. In comparison, Zanpakutō is not very useful to him. That's all. When Kuretsuchi Mayuri showed his weird form, there were also swirling circles in his yellow pupils. Reiatsu, which is not strong, acts on Mikami Seiki. Mikami Seiki, who was in a trance, narrated in detail how he felt facing Zael Aporo that day. Moyu realized that this move did not cause any harm to Mikami Seiki, so he did not stop Kuretsuchi Mayuri's behavior. This speech is more useful than the previous one. Kuretsuchi Mayuri stopped the flipping spiritual pen in his hand, and pressed heavily on the notebook. Mikami Seiki also came back from a trance, and subconsciously looked at Kuretsuchi Mayuri with fear. In his mind, the danger level of this guy in front of him was no less than that of the Manos Grande he met that day, even worse. Both of them seemed to be extremely crazy existences in essence. Thank you Mr. Moyu for your cooperation. Kuretsuchi Mayuri put away the pen and paper, and said in a humble manner. He didn't seem to take the displeasure between the two of them to heart. With this material, it is supplemented with the residual Reiatsu collected in Karakura town. Thinking about it, my experiment should have a new breakthrough. Regarding this, Moyu looked flat and did not express his opinion. As long as this guy doesn't take his mind on himself, then everything is fine. Although Kuretsuchi Mayuri is crazy, the premise of his madness is based on self-confidence. Before there is no absolute and safe means, he will not move those crooked thoughts at all. Everything in the world is imperfect. Kuretsuchi Mayuri's eyes rolled violently. I am the same, and Mr. Moyu is also the same. However, it is precisely because of this imperfection that there is room for improvement. You should understand what I mean. The grotesque smile, coupled with vague words, made this guy enter a state of madness. Moyu frowned slightly, realizing what he was trying to express. As one of the top scientific researchers in the whole world, Kuretsuchi Mayuri hates the word perfect, almost to the point of morbidity. Because only imperfection can pursue perfection. Kuretsuchi Mayuri left temporarily with Mikami Seiki's transcript and Reiatsu collected in Karakura town. But that's exactly what gave Moyu a headache. This dangerous guy obviously didn't give up his goal. In other words, if Kuretsuchi Mayuri encounters a bottleneck in research, he may come to Karakura town again at any time. Kuretsuchi Mayuri Urahara Kazuki rubbed his somewhat messy short light yellow hair, and said with a sad expression. That's a troublesome fellow. I didn't expect him to come to Karakura town, it's a headache. After hearing the news of Kuretsuchi Mayuri's visit from Moyu, Urahara Kazuki began to think about countermeasures. As a scientific researcher, he is well aware of Kuretsuchi Mayuri's observation ability and various means. Once or twice is better, and if the guy comes a few more times, it's not impossible to discover the existence of the Urahara store. And on that day, perhaps waiting for them will be the captains of Gotei 13. The sentence handed down by Central 46 himself was escaped by him. With the morbid mentality of that group of lofty sages and judges, they will never miss any chance to restore their dignity. And Kuretsuchi Mayuri would definitely like to see that scene. He has always had an aversion to Urahara Kazuki. This disgust comes from jealousy and dissatisfaction. Information, I have sent it. So, I'll take my leave, thank you for your hospitality. Moyu put down the teacup in his hand, smacked his lips, and was quite satisfied with the taste of the tea. Since he suggested it last time, Tessai Tsukubishi has replaced the tea leaves he was brewing with fresh green tea. And this move made the Urahara store, which was already sluggish, even worse. Just when he stood up and was about to leave. Urahara Kazuki hurriedly grabbed Moyu. Mr. Moyu, I need your help. Moyu frowned slightly, with a bad premonition in his heart. What's the matter? Urahara Kazuki grinned at the corners of his mouth like a triumphant fox. I already know the reason why Kuretsuchi Mayuri came to this world. And his purpose afterwards, I have learned a little bit more. So, can you? Before he finished speaking, Moyu interrupted directly. It's impossible, it doesn't exist, don't even think about it. Kuretsuchi Mayuri eyes Moyu's Reiatsu. And before he could execute it, Moyu almost sent him to see the King of Souls with a thunderous thunder. As long as Urahara Kazuki has a similar behavior, Moyu doesn't mind giving this guy a shot too. After all, in essence, both of them belong to the ranks of scientific researchers. The only difference is that Urahara Kazuki can better control his emotions. Sarah, I understand. Urahara Kazuki did not show disappointment. As for Moyu's reaction, he had already guessed. Reiatsu or something, let's put it aside for now. Right now, there are more important things waiting for us to solve. Come with me. Urahara Kazuki's mysterious appearance aroused curiosity in Moyu's heart. He followed behind, towards the back of the Urahara store. Underground secret base. As for the secret base under the Urahara store, Moyu has been there many times during his time in the present world. The vast space even exceeds the area of Karakura town itself. The structure in it involves the extremely high and deep space Kido. Obviously, Tessai Tsukubishi contributed the most. In Urahara Kazuki's private research institute, two figures shuttle between various complicated instruments. So, that's the more important thing you're talking about. Moyu frowned tightly, looking at the screen in front of him suspiciously. On it, the endless white sofas whizzed, and the withered grass rolled up from time to time showed the desolation in it even more. Shish, look carefully. Urahara Kazuki put his fingers in front of his face and made a silent gesture. As soon as the voice fell, the picture on the screen changed. The white desert suddenly began to collapse. The white sand within a radius of several kilometers suddenly sank, sinking into the deeper ground. A large number of quartz trees grow up from the ground, gradually occupying the desert. This, Moyu's eyes widened slightly, a guess flashed in his mind, and he said subconsciously. Is this a Haweko Mundo? Bingo. The fireworks that Urahara Kazuki took out from nowhere were launched in the laboratory, and a large number of fireworks confetti fell. Congratulations, you got it. Unfortunately, there is no reward. To be precise, this is the forest of Manos Grande. Moyu's pupils shrunk when he heard the name. At this moment, he finally realized the purpose of Urahara Kazuki for letting him see this picture. The forest of Manos Grande is the place where Jillian and his subordinates live in Hueco Mundo, and it is usually managed by Manos Grande assigned by Aizen. This is what Moyu knows about the forest of Manos Grande. Urahara Kazuki looked slightly dignified, and said seriously. After the Hueco Mundo War, forest of Manos Grande expanded. The forest of Manos Grande, can it expand itself? Moyu's face was full of surprise, unable to understand. The forest of Manos Grande located under the white sand is so large that it is far beyond the cognitive range of normal people. Among them, the number of ghosts has reached an incomprehensible number. Urahara Kazuki once went to the forest of Manos Grande for investigation and research, and he could only choose one of the ranges to enter it. Even so, its scope is still beyond Moyu's expectations. And now, the forest of Manos Grande is expanding from the ground to the ground. The quartz tree sticking out of the ground is the best proof. The gigantic Jillian also protruded from the quartz tree. The emotionless blood-red eyes scanned the surrounding environment. They didn't seem to realize that they had come to the ground. In terms of individual consciousness, Jillian is even inferior to some subordinates. After devouring hundreds of the same kind in a row, their consciousness seemed to be devoured as well, thus completely lost. After the individual consciousness is completely lost, unless it evolves into a Jukas, it will maintain this posture throughout its life. Only a very small number of Jillians can have their own consciousness. For example, the ninth Espada, Araniero Urururi, was created by Aizen, and it came from Jillian Arankar. Recalling this in his mind, Moyu cast his eyes on Urahara Kazuki, who looked calm, and asked, "You don't seem to feel strange or confused about this scene." Urahara Kazuki stretched out his slender fingers, dancing on the console in front of the screen like playing a piano. After a while, the screen on it turned and became dark and gloomy. This is the real Manos Grande forest. Urahara Kazuki pointed to the picture on the screen and explained, "When I went to investigate the cause of the war in Hueco Mundo last time, I placed some spiritual transformation detectors in it. Combined with the Reiatsu capture device, it is enough to project the picture across borders. But this can only be done when the surrounding Reiatsu is stable. Once there is a strong Reiatsu presence, the Reiatsu catcher will fluctuate and the screen cannot be switched." He didn't answer Moyu's question directly, but first explained the picture on the screen in front of him. In this case, the Reiatsu catcher has had 38 swings. As soon as these words came out, Moyu frowned slightly. "Are there Arankars or Ajukas passing by?" Urahara Kazuki nodded, his expression slightly serious. "Just in this area, there have been 38 fluctuations. This means that the ruler of the forest of Manos Grande will no longer be Jillian, but Manos Grande above Ajukas. That doesn't rule out Arankar." Having said that, he suddenly looked at Moyu with extremely serious eyes, and said, "Mr. Moyu, do you know what this means?" Moyu sighed and replied, "It means that if the Manos Grandes of the Manos Grande forest appear in this world, Seraite will be short-staffed. Manos Grande is not something that ordinary players can handle. And this means that Seraite will have an empty situation, and some guys hiding in the dark may act because of this." Urahara Kazuki nodded, grinning with satisfaction. Moyu belongs to the ranks of smart people, and he likes communicating with smart people the most. That's right. Urahara Kazuki pressed the switch at hand, and the picture on the screen changed abruptly, returning to the barren white sand desert. As for the expansion of the forest of Manos Grande, whether it is for the present world or for the Soul Society, it's going to be an unavoidable disaster. The reason, I speculate, is because of the war. But in fact, that's not the case. Hearing this, Moyu nodded, with thoughtful eyes in his eyes, and analyzed. Those who participated in the war, including the subordinates in the forest of Manos Grande and the Jillians. Although it can successfully evolve after devouring the same kind, it will also lead to a reduction in the virtual base. The forest of Manos Grande expanded for another reason. Hearing these words, the satisfaction on Urahara Kazuki's face became more and more obvious. It seems that Mr. Moyu is not as bad as it is spread in the Spirit Academy. In terms of brain, it's still very clever. Moyu glanced at this guy indifferently, apparently not having a good impression of him. But with Urahara Kazuki's face, he didn't take this point to heart at all. He went on selfishly. "So, There is a very important task waiting for Mr. Moyu to complete. Hearing this, Moyu suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. What do you want to do? Urahara Kazuki stretched his arms into the depths of the laboratory and made a strange sound. Dang dang dang. Next, I would like to introduce my major invention some time ago. Black cavity piercing gate. You want me to go to Haweko Mundo to find out why the forest of Manos Grande expanded? Moyu looked at the confident Urahara Kazuki in astonishment. This is doing scientific research. Has it ruined your brain? Where does your honeyed confidence come from? Let alone our differences in position. You are just a fugitive, and you still want to command a well-organized one. Did Jillian gnaw your brains? Sir, Mr. Moyu, don't be so heartless. Sure enough, few people who do research are normal. Urahara Kazuki came over, telling a frightening thing in a creepy tone. We used to have a friendship of living in the same room. Could it be that you are so heartless? Zilla. The lightning in the air made this guy shut his mouth immediately. Actually, it's entirely because the research on the black cavity piercing gate is not perfect. Urahara Kazuki changed his face like turning the pages of a book. The last time I went to Haweko Mundo, it was actually just a coincidence. He explained somewhat helplessly. After suppressing my own Reiatsu seal, I will then pass through the previous version of the black cavity through the portal. A lot of dangers were encountered in it, and there were even sudden encounters. If you're not lucky, you might not be able to see me anymore. Moyu is also clear about this. Ordinary world traversing gates can't bear the captain level Reiatsu at all. If you pass through rashly, encountering danger is secondary, and getting lost in the boundary is the real disaster. And opening the black cavity is a skill that uses Reiatsu to forcibly destroy the space. There are extremely high requirements for user operation. Call. Urahara Kazuki let out a long breath. Mr. Moyu, you know, go to Haweko Mundo to explore the secrets of the Manos Grande forest. It's actually about saving the world. If the forest of Manos Grande is allowed to expand, it will inevitably lead to a world-class disaster. Hearing this, Moyu looked at the guy with disdain. Others don't know, isn't he still clear? It is impossible to allow this to happen just because of the existence of a zero team. The forest of Manos Grande is a hammer. No matter how much awful there is, it's still just awful. In this world, quantitative change is not enough to cause qualitative change. Those beings under the zenith, any one person can easily slaughter the so-called forest of Manos Grande. Urahara Kazuki's move obviously has a deeper meaning. Still, a trip to the Haweko Mundo or something isn't out of the question. As long as you avoid those espadas, the Haweko Mundo is no danger. Even, fighting can properly improve the progress of Zonquan Zugi's practice. So, in this regard, I can agree to your request. Moyu said lightly, but, what good do I have? Wanting him to go away in vain does not exist at all. Facing someone like Urahara Kazuki, you can't easily agree to his request. Otherwise, this guy will definitely push his feet. Well, a thoughtful look appeared on Urahara Kazuki's face. For Moyu's sudden promise, he was a little uncomfortable. Originally, he was actually planning to go to Haweko Mundo with the group of Visored. But right now, Moyu has become the best choice. Because the strength gap between the two is not a star. If Quanchi has 6 cars, then Moyu has at least 60 cars, or even more. Remuneration. Urahara Kazuki thought about what he had in hand. There are many valuable ones, but most are too dangerous to be given to Moyu. As for Kido, as Moyu, he can return to the Soul Society to study at any time. In this regard, it seems that there is nothing to talk about. Correct. Suddenly Urahara Kazuki's eyes lit up, thinking of one thing. When you return from Haweko Mundo, I'll give you a ghost costume. Hearing this, Moyu couldn't help but look sideways. One of Urahara Kazuki's most important inventions is the spirit mask clothing. Its appearance is a large black cloak, which can completely hide the wearer's Reiatsu. If it is assisted by Bakudo's 26 bent light, it can achieve the effect of invisibility. Relying on this, Aizen has completed many plans in the Soul Society and the present world. You're sure to be pleased with this thing, Urahara Kazuki said confidently. Well, in that case, I promise you, Moyu said calmly. He is also very curious about everything in Haweko Mundo. Now that you have this opportunity, you might as well go and check it out. As for his own safety, he is still very confident. Underground secret base. In the empty place, a huge black cavity-piercing gate stands here. Because its structure is not perfect, Urahara Kazuki needs to maintain it outside. And Moyu, about to be alone, embarks on the journey to Haweko Mundo. Ha, Moyu, I knew you weren't the kind of person who is heartless. With a huge impact, it hit Moyu's shoulder. If it weren't for the airbag, Moyu suspects he might have broken a bone because of it. He bared his teeth and looked at Shihoin Yoruichi, who was holding his shoulders, and asked with some toothache. Are you going to Haweko Mundo too? Shihoin Yoruichi gave him a strange look and explained. This kind of thing is related to the safety of the whole world, how can I ignore it? Besides, don't you still accompany me here? Moyu sighed, not optimistic about the next Haweko Mundo trip. The black cavity transgressing door opened, and the space within it fluctuated and vortexed, presenting a radiant scene. Strong Reiatsu oppression is enough to make the soul of an ordinary person collapse on the spot. But this little pressure is tantamount to nothing for the people present. Under the encouraging gaze of Urahara Kazuki, Moyu and Shihoin Yoruichi exchanged glances, and stepped straight into the portal. Watching the disappearing figures of the two, Urahara Kazuki lowered the brim of his hat so that his eyes were obscured by the shadows. Mr. Moyu, hopefully my bet is right this time. Haweko Mundo. Above the barren white sand desert, the crescent moon hangs high. The howling wind slammed hard on the scattered rock walls, making an ear-piercing and shrill sound. In the empty desert, there seemed to be no living creatures. Here, there is a dead silence. Suddenly, under a rock wall, a strange fluctuation occurred in the space. Like glass hit by a stone, there were shattered cracks like spider webs in the empty air. Kalala, a large area of space was broken, forming a deep darkness. Two figures walked out of it together. A curious look appeared on Moyu's face. Here is Haweko Mundo. It was roughly the same as the scenery in his impression. Wherever one enters one's eyes, there is pale white sand, and the air is filled with messy spiritual seeds. Compared with the present world, the concentration of spirit particles in Haweko Mundo is particularly chaotic. However, generally speaking, the higher the concentration of spirit particles, the greater the number of ghosts, and there is a certain guarantee in terms of strength. Because the black cavity-piercing gate is not yet perfect, Urahara Kazuki can only set the teleportation location within a certain area, and the specific location can only be said to be random. Right now, all they have to do is to determine the location of the forest of Manos Grande. It looks like we need to. Shihoin Yoruichi held a radar-like instrument, looked at it, and determined the location of the two. Go north. Before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by Moyu. Compared to that guy Urahara's instrument, I am more willing to trust my own perception ability. The Reiatsu over there is messy and numerous. If there is no accident, it should be the edge of the forest of Manos Grande. Shihoin Yoruichi put away the instrument, folded his hands, and said in a big sister's gesture. Sir, it looks like Mr. Moyu is the best one. If that's the case, then the trip to Haweko Mundo is up to you to arrange. Cats are always wary of unfamiliar environments. However, if there are acquaintances accompanying him, it can give him a lot of peace of mind. Above the desert, the figure flickered. With the speed of the two, they arrived at the place Moyu said in less than an hour. Sensing the messy Reiatsu coming from underground, Shihoin Yoruichi couldn't help but click his tongue. I'm afraid there are at least 100 ghosts down here, right? To be precise, it should be 236 juniors and 27 jillions. Moyu corrected. Hearing this, Shihoin Yoruichi couldn't help but look suspiciously at the guy beside him. With the gradual deepening of understanding during this period, she felt more and more mysterious about her former playmate. Unfathomable strength, extremely strong talent, and some unpredictable brain circuits. Let's go. Moyu was unaware of Shihoin Yoruichi's increasingly distorted gaze. At this moment, he is seriously perceiving the situation under the desert. When he came to Haweko Mundo for the first time, he brought his cautious essence into ultimate. Our time is only 3 days, don't waste it. According to Urahara Kazuki, the black cavity-piercing gate can only last for 3 days. Once this time is exceeded, they need to find a new way to return to this world. and in this way, the risk factor will be greatly increased. Moyu urged himself Reiatsu, and the strong pressure hit the ground under his feet. Suddenly, the bottom collapsed, and the two of them sank into the ground along with the chaotic white sand. The thick branches of the quartz tree appeared in front of the two of them. Under the protection of Reiatsu, they were not influenced by the outside world. Clatter. A large amount of white sand poured down along the potholes, like a torrential rain, falling in the forest of Manos Grande. The subordinates directly below were also frightened by such a large number of white sands. But when they raised their heads and looked at the world above, they all fell into crazy excitement. Soul. A living soul. Food. Delicious food. Haha, I declare these two guys to be mine. Be the first to strike first, whoever grabs it belongs to him. Crazy roars filled the place below. And just as they were raging madly, the existence they regarded as food suddenly stretched out their right index finger. Moyu looked at the dark place below with no expression on his face, and said softly, Sato Hado, the way of the 4-day and Sun Thunder. That's right. After Baile automatically learned the advanced method, he advanced from Hado 4 to Lee Hado. The difference between Hado and Hado is like Gote 13 and Team 0. Not all the captains of the 0 division are above the captains of Gote 13. They are also strong and weak. At Setsuna, where Moyu's voice fell, raging lightning surged out from his fingertips, turning into a howling brontosaurus. On the ferocious dragon head, countless streaks of scorching thunder light danced and roared. There was a burning smell in the air. The darkness was instantly dispelled because of this. Shihu and Yoruichi saw the scene below clearly. Under the oppression of the Thunder Dragon, no matter if it was Manos Grande or the subordinate Shu, they were all frozen in place, unable to move at all. Their eyes were full of despair. Death has come quietly amidst the Thunder Dragon's roar. Boom! The violent roar echoed in the forest of Manos Grande. In Setsuna, where the brontosaur fell, a small sun seemed to appear in the forest of Manos Grande. Dazzling light burst out suddenly, covering a range of several miles. The quartz tree running through the Beisha desert collapsed, and the ground bearing it wailed. Like an earthquake, the soil rolled, tore and flew. Countless thunder and lightning ravaged, engulfed, and bitten in it. The screams, under the roar of thunder, were insignificant. And this scene lasted almost until the two of them completely fell to the ground. Shihu and Yoruichi opened his mouth slightly, looking at the scene in front of him in astonishment. I was worried about how to solve the Manos Grande below. But before landing completely, the crisis has been completely resolved by Moyu. As for him, he just cast a Kido. Kido. Shihu and Yoruichi suddenly raised his head, his golden pupils were full of astonishment. The Kido you cast just now. Only now did she remember what Moyu whispered beside her. Re-Kido, the 4 ways day and Sun Thunder. Shihu and Yoruichi, who used to be the head of the 20th second generation of the Shihuan family, still has a certain understanding of the concept of Re-Kido. The existence above the concept of Hado, its power is higher than 90% of Hado. Only a few Hado can rival it. However, these are only secondary. Power or something, Shihu and Yoruichi has seen a more terrifying existence. But mastering the concept of Hado is different. As far as she knows, in Hado, only the members of the 0 division can master the ability to perform. The inside story of the Kuchiki house. Moyu said calmly, without the slightest sense of shame that he blushed for lying. In this regard, he seems to have already been familiar with the road. Shihu and Yoruichi stared suspiciously at the guy in front of him. As one of the 5 nobles, she still has a certain understanding of the Kuchiki family. Whether it is Kuchiki Yinling or Byakuya Kuchiki, Shihu and Yoruichi is relatively familiar with each other, and they all have a certain understanding of each other. She has never heard anything about the Kuchiki family background from the two, let alone Rihado. And this Kuchiki Moyu, no matter how long he gets along with him, he can't see through it completely. All kinds of secrets seem to emerge endlessly. Especially after being apart for a while. Okay, let's put this matter aside for now. Shihu and Yoruichi didn't dwell on it for long. She looked slightly dignified, carefully looking at the surrounding environment. After the thunder light dissipated, darkness invaded the place again. In the distance, the faint light on the quartz tree is the only light here. We next. Shihu and Yoruichi pointed to the dark depths, go straight to the deepest part of the north. Based on the Reiatsu trap that Urahara guy set up and the information he provided, the place where Reiatsu fluctuates most violently should be about 1,200 kilometers to the north. Moyu nodded, approving Shihoin Yoruichi's proposal. Ever since entering the forest of Manos Grande, he felt a strong sense of depression. The whole person seems to be in the deep sea, with a sense of suffocation and oppression covering the whole body and mind. If it were an ordinary person who came here, he would probably have a mental breakdown long ago. Fortunately, both Shihoin Yoruichi and Moyu are extremely resistant to this, so the pressure is nothing. According to the information provided by Urahara Kazuki, the two headed straight to the north, and compared to the ground, there was much less movement. After all, this is the forest of Manos Grande, so it is right to be cautious. In the case of convergent Reiatsu, the speed is also greatly reduced. However, even so, they encountered many waves of virtual groups along the way, many of whom were Manos Grande. Even, there is the existence of Ajukas. The situation is far more serious than I thought. After Moyu killed a Jillian with a casual punch, he said solemnly. Just during the time I was on the road, I have already met dozens of Jillians. When will these things appear in groups like wholesale? Shihoin Yoruichi's complexion was also extremely ugly. There is something nearby that attracts the Manos Grande. We may just be affected. Before he could finish his words, Moyu suddenly noticed a cloud of dust rising up in the front left direction. That is, Moyu's expression froze, realizing the astonishing amount of Manos Grande among them. But what surprised him even more was the object that this group of Manos Grande was chasing. The small figure ran in front of the Manos Grandes at an extremely fast speed. The green hair is constantly beating with his movements, and the worn-out blue coat gives people a pitiful feeling. The little guy's face was full of horror, and tears rolled down his cheeks. While running away, he was also crying loudly. Oh, Nailu is so scared. Woo, don't be eaten by Nailu. For the little guy running towards him, Moyu immediately recognized it. There is nothing more recognizable than Lori. Short green hair, a scar extending from the forehead to the right side of the nose, and the broken skull mask. Coupled with the self-proclaimed shouting in its mouth. Everything is to make its identity clear. The third of the original Espada, Arankar Wang Shu of the Vasto Lord class, Neliel Tu Odelschwenk. Because of Neutra and Shielaporo's joint black hands, Nailu was seriously injured by his surprise attack and her mask was shattered. The shattering of the mask caused its Reiatsu to continue to pass away, and even caused Nailu to degenerate from Vasto Lord level Arankar Wang Shu to Ajuka's level Arankar. Moreover, the body also shrunk into the shape of a loli, and lost all memories. Although I don't know why this guy appeared in the forest of Manos Grande. But Moyu understands that if he saves this little guy, he may try the cultivation plan. The pure and kind character makes Nailu completely different from other Espadas. She is the most suitable existence to be a companion and even a deeper relationship. Well, it looks like there is civil turmoil in Zuken. Shihoin Yoruichi put his hands between his foreheads in a gaze-like gesture. Cats have much better eyesight than humans, so she can clearly see the roaring Manos Grande in the distance. Individual young Ajuka's class Arankar. Moyu analyzed, although there is no basis, I have a hunch. The reason for the expansion of Manos Grande forest may have something to do with that little guy. Otherwise, these Manos Grandes wouldn't be so crazy. Hearing this, Shihoin Yoruichi pondered for a moment. You can try to save it. An Arankar of Ajuka's is no danger to us. Besides, when Shihoin Yoruichi spoke, he opened his hands and gestured, it's still such a small one. In that case, Moyu raised his right hand, and the music at his fingertips was thunderous. However, before he could release the attack, he was stopped by Shihoin Yoruichi. Your attack movement is too outrageous. This time, leave it to me. Hearing this, a look of distrust appeared on Moyu's face. You, little devil. Moyu's expression directly angered Shihoin Yoruichi. The other party was like a cat with its hair blown up, grinning and showing its canine teeth, and said fiercely. Are you looking down on me? When did you become so arrogant? Don't underestimate people, you. Moyu spread his hands and said helplessly. Blame me. In my opinion, the flash goddess who was famous in the Soul Society has long been obliterated by time. The strongest player in Shunpo right now is Captain Sui Feng of the second team. Hearing this name, Shihuan Yoruichi turned his head aside and said disdainfully. That little girl wants to surpass me. 100 years too early. Next, widen your eyes and watch carefully. I'll let you know what Shunpo's ultimate is. After Setsuna's voice fell, Moyu just realized that the figure in front of him had disappeared into the air like a bubble. The strong Reiatsu exploded on Shihuan Yoruichi's back and shoulders, creating a shocking wave. The whole person seemed to be in the eye of a strong wind, and everything around him was blown away. Instant coax. A violent figure flashed across the air. The next moment, Shihuan Yoruichi crossed the barrier of space and came to the virtual group. Completely different from the virtual Reiatsu, submerged into the virtual group. It was like a drop of cold water falling into a hot oil pan, directly making Shukyun boil. Shinigami. Intruder, kill her. I'm going to tear her apart. Crazy words spread among the virtual group. Sensing Shihuan Yoruichi Reiatsu's virtual group, he immediately switched the target to her. And this is exactly what Shihuan Yoruichi wants to see. Instant coaxing, combining the high-end fighting skills of Kido and white hits. Shihuan Yoruichi, incarnation of God of War. In this form, Shunpo's speed, has reached the ultimate state. With the current virtual group, it is impossible to capture her figure. The figures that shuttle through the Shu group, every time they stay, there is a Shu or Manos Grande's body that is directly pierced. Moyu was not idle either. At the moment the battle started, he also activated Shunpo and disappeared in place. Boom! Nailu, who was running away, directly bumped into Moyu's body. There was a low collision sound and the reaction force made the little guy sit on the ground. Nailu grinned, her eyes filled with horror, her small body curled up into a ball, crying. Wow, Nailu is so scared. Don't kill Nailu. Nailu didn't do anything, Nailu just got lost. Nailu looked at the appearance of the person in front of her, feeling terrified in her heart. She had seen existences wearing such black clothes before. Those people called themselves Shinigami, and their attitude towards Shu was straight to kill on the spot without any hesitation. Now that I have met the so-called Shinigami, will I be killed by the other party? Death, the word appeared in front of Nailu's eyes. It made this little guy's cry even more miserable. Why did you kill you? Moyu squatted down, looked at him, and asked softly. Really, won't you kill me? Nailu's crying gradually died down, and her crystal-clear golden-green pupils were full of curiosity. Those Shinigami Before she could finish her words, she felt warmth coming from her head. Moyu put his hands on Nailu's short lake green hair, rubbed it vigorously, and explained. I'm not like them. Among the Shinigami, there are completely different individuals. Just like you who are virtual. Hearing this, Nailu's crying stopped abruptly. She looked at Moyu in a daze, and was stunned for a moment. And, is it the same as Nailu? His eyes gradually rejoiced, as if he was happy to find the same kind. Losing her memory, she seems to be a different kind in Hueco Mundo. Now, it seems that he has finally found the same existence as himself. All right, Moyu stood up and looked at Shihuan Yoruichi who was still fighting. The danger is not lifted yet. He stretched out his hand to Nailu and asked, do you want to leave with me? Nailu hesitated for a moment, then asked pitifully. You really won't kill Nailu? Moyu nodded, looked at her sincerely, and said. Of course, I'm not a person who doesn't count his words. Nailu, who received the response, seemed to be relieved, and clung tightly to Moyu's side. She has always been willing to believe in the kindness of others. And this is why it ended up like this. Moyu looked at Nailu, who was close to his legs, with a satisfied smile on his face. The abduction plan seems to be quite successful. As the third Espada, Nailu, if she can recover her own strength, her fighting power will become one of the strongest in Hueco Mundo. Even if it is placed in the Soul Society, it can be regarded as a first-class existence. Docile personality, reciprocating kindness, obedient to words. There is nothing more desirable than a Neliel-2 Odelschwenk. Moyu rubbed Nailu's head gently. Feeling the warmth from the top of her head, Nailu raised her head curiously to look around. The sincere gaze made him feel at ease. Moyu smiled slightly, looked up at the figure shuttling among the empty group, a trace of regret flashed in his eyes. Yoruichi's strength is still a bit down. When she came to the present world, she lacked fighting all the year round, and she has gradually developed from a vigorous black cat to a big orange. If not for the wrong color. Moyu even suspects that Shihuin Yoruichi's figure will be out of shape because of this. Your white hits has greatly increased its comprehension by watching Shihuin Yoruichi's instant form, and comprehended instant missing. Your Kido has greatly increased his comprehension by watching Shihuin Yoruichi's instant form, and comprehended instant missing. When Setsuna heard the system notification sound, the skills of using instantaneous came to Moyu's mind. Because instant coaxing is the combined technique of Kido and white hits, both of them are part of the comprehension that belongs to us. When the two parts are fused together, it forms an instant coaxing combat technique. At the same time, Shunpo also seems to have aroused his competitive spirit because of white hits and Kido's overcompetence. Your Shunpo has greatly increased his competitive spirit, increased his practice efficiency, and increased his speed by 30% due to observing Shihuin Yoruichi's Shunpo. After learning all Sifung's secret footwork, Shunpo has reached a certain bottleneck. It is obviously extremely difficult to make a substantial improvement again. It can only be worn and improved bit by bit through time. Unfortunately, this form doesn't seem to be suitable for me to display. Moyu shook his head regretfully. The instant opening will cause the shoulders and back to be wrapped with highly concentrated Kido, and the clothes will be damaged as a result. If it is Shihuin Yoruichi or Sui Feng, it is simply a representative of beautiful fighting. But a man casts instant coax. Moyu just came up with this idea in his mind, and felt a chill in his heart. Shihuin Yoruichi realized that Moyu had stabilized Nailu, so he began to try to break away from the virtual group. She meant to get it all over with. But as the battle time prolongs, other ghosts continue to join in the darkness. The number of imaginary groups increase instead of decrease. Chapter 71. The number of ghosts in the forest of Manos Grande has exceeded the safe threshold. Shihuin Yoruichi, who got out of the empty group, stepped lightly and appeared beside Moyu. The severity of the situation has already exceeded my expectations. She lowered her eyes slightly, looked at Nailu beside Moyu, and said curiously, "I didn't expect her to trust you so quickly. How did you do it?" Shihuin Yoruichi's gaze made Nailu a little afraid, making her grab Moyu's clothes subconsciously. "Well," Moyu said thoughtfully, "maybe it's because I'm sincere." While speaking, he reached out and rubbed Nailu's short lake green hair. "Well, it feels really good. Shu-kyun has already rushed over here." Shihuin Yoruichi narrowed his eyes slightly, and compared the physical gap between himself and Nailu. Immediately felt relieved, no longer take it to heart. "Let's hurry up and get out of here first." Moyu nodded, stretched out his arms to Nailu, and said, "Come on, I'll take you to a safe place first." Without hesitation, Nailu opened her hands and slipped into Moyu's embrace. Trust is often as simple as that. After a short period of running in, Nailu has obviously chosen to trust this, similar, in front of her. After all, the person in front of her was also the person she saved from Vice Admiral. As for Shihuin Yoruichi, who fought against the virtual group, he was selectively ignored. Perhaps, this is the principle of same-gender repulsion. With their Shunpo attainments, it couldn't be easier to leave under Shu-kyun's pursuit. Half an hour later, deep in the forest of Manos Grande, under the tall quartz trees, Moyu and Shihuin Yoruichi sat back to back in the clearing. There is an arrangement of the seal Kido around, which can isolate the Reiatsu of the three people to the greatest extent. After being free, Moyu finally had time to ask Nailu some things. Nailu, who was taken out of her arms, looked at Moyu with a blank expression. "Well, what's up with Moyu?" She seemed to be a little greedy for the smell of Moyu, subconsciously looking towards his arms. The warm breath seemed to have been felt for a long time. The natural blank expression makes it difficult for people to feel disgusted with him. Moyu placed it in front of him, and asked seriously, "Nailu, why did you appear in the forest of Manos Grande? Also, what do you know about the changes in the forest of Manos Grande?" Hearing this, Shihuin Yoruichi's eyes lit up immediately. Perhaps, the little guy in front of him will know something about the reason for the expansion of the forest of Manos Grande. Even if you don't know, it may have something to do with it. Such a young Ijuka's Arankar is extremely rare among Hawako Mundo. And Shihuin Yoruichi stared at Nailu with a strange expression. The Reiatsu of this little guy named Nailu seems a little, weak. Hearing Moyu's words, Nailu put her finger on her chin, with a thoughtful look on her face. Nailu was playing an infinite game of hide-and-seek with Dong Chaka and the others. And then suddenly, she opened her hands, made an exaggerated expression, and described, the ground under her feet collapsed directly. We fell straight into the dead forest. Nailu also separated from Dong Chaka and the others, and then. Speaking of this, Nailu hesitated for a moment, then grinned and said, then I will meet Moyu. Although what Nailu said was a bit simple, Moyu had already analyzed it. The expansion of the forest of Manos Grande caused Nailu and others to fall from the ground. And Nailu was discovered by the virtual group after being separated from the Donchakas. Shu, if he wants to evolve, he must devour the same kind and plunder the Reiatsu of other Shu, so as to achieve the purpose of evolution. Nailu used to be Vasto Lord level Arankar Wang Shu, and the essence of Reiatsu is already different from ordinary Shu. Her Reiatsu, for ordinary people, is simply the most perfect food. If they can devour it, they might be able to evolve to the Vasto Lord level too. This is also the reason why Zukin chased and killed Nailu. Nailu, who was severely injured, already has no combat power at all. If Reiatsu is exhausted during the chase, a dire fate awaits her. It's just that Nailu doesn't know about the changes in the Forest of Death. Nailu looked around, and the darkness seemed to be able to swallow it. She shuddered and subconsciously crawled into Moyu's arms. The Forest of Death in his mouth seems to be the Forest of Manos Grande. For Nailu's current state, this place is indeed very dangerous. Hearing this, Shihuin Yoruichi sighed, looked at Moyu, and asked. Now, what shall we do? Return to the present world. Moyu lowered his eyes slightly, and a lot of information surged in his mind. Suddenly, his eyes light up slightly. I only heard him say in a firm tone. Do not, we can still find someone. He must know the root of the problem. Who? Shihuin Yoruichi was puzzled by Moyu's words. Could it be that Moyu has made so many friends? Even Hawako Mundo has his friends. A Shinigami, to be precise. Moyu stood up. It may be difficult to find a ghost in the forest of Manos Grande. But if you want to find traces of Shinigami, it's relatively easy. There are so many ghosts, if you want to find your goal, it is almost like looking for a needle in a haystack. But Shinigami's Reiatsu is completely different from hollow. It's like an oil flower floating on the water, you can spot it at a glance. Also, they have profiling tools provided by Urahara Kazuki. Yoruichi, you are in charge of finding Shinigami like Reiatsu using the Reiatsu profiler. I'm in charge of using Reiatsu perception and Kido detection. Moyu quickly made an assignment. For his words, Shihuin Yoruichi just hesitated, and went to carry it out. Right now, she can't think of any good solution, so she can only do what Moyu said. Under Moyu's control, his Reiatsu perception spreads far and wide, until found it. After more than 10 minutes, Moyu opened his eyes, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Sure enough, he is still in the forest of Manos Grande. And the detection tool studied by Urahara Kazuki is obviously not as good as Moyu's Reiatsu perception. Shihuin Yoruichi had nothing to gain here. The group of three embarked on the journey to the depths of the Manos Grande forest again. Moyu, who the hell are we looking for? On the way, Shihuin Yoruichi couldn't hold back his inner confusion anymore, and asked. You'll know when you get there. Moyu made a fool of himself. That guy, you should know something. Another few hours away, the darkness in the forest even surpassed the light emitted by the quartz trees. With greatly reduced visibility, Moyu finally found his purpose. A figure like Arankar shuttled over the quartz tree. An antelope-shaped void mask, a black death suit, and a plush cloak with 5 skulls. Like a cross between Manos Grande and Shinigami. If it weren't for the oppression of his external Reiatsu, no one would be able to confirm his true identity. But at this very moment, this guy is killing among the empty group. The strong strength makes it break into the virtual flock, just like a tiger into a flock. It was almost a one-sided massacre. That's it, Shinigami. Shihoin Yoruichi's golden eyes were full of astonishment. Only now did she realize the correctness of what Moyu just said. Squad 11, Asido. Moyu watched the opponent's battle quietly, and said softly. Hundreds of years ago, he led the team into the Haweko Mundo, and lost his way back. Those soldiers died one by one in the forest of Manos Grande. Now, there should be only Asador who is the strongest. When his voice fell, Asido's battle also came to an end. The ground was full of stumps, broken arms, and damaged bodies. The scene was once very horrifying. And Asido also found the figures of the two, and the figures flickered, and came to them. Shinigami. With Arankar, his tone was full of surprise. Obviously, for the appearance of this combination, I was very puzzled. 3 seats in the 4th division, Kuchiki Moyu. Moyu has always respected this kind of strong man with his own perseverance. Well, Shihoin Yoruichi. When Moyu said the name of the guy in front of him, information about Asido also appeared in Shihoin Yoruichi's mind. Kuchiki's house, Shihoin's house. Asido took off his mask. With short auburn hair and straight eyebrows, he looked handsome. I didn't expect to see Shinigami in my lifetime. You guys are pretty good. Moyu knew about his personality, so he didn't deliberately engage in any conversation, but went straight to the point. We learned in this world that the forest of Manos Grande began to expand towards the ground of Haweko Mundo during this time. Do you know the reason for this? Hearing this, Asido looked a little depressed. After a while, he just raised his head and said in a very heavy tone. In the forest of Manos Grande, a new Wangshu was born. At the same time, on the other side of the Manos Grande forest, a tall figure appeared here. In his hand, a huge double crescent sickle hangs upside down, exuding a cold glow. The terrifying Reiatsu devastated everything around him, and a crazy expression appeared on his ferocious face. This Reiatsu, this disgusting smell, the new Wangshu. Hearing this information, Moyu immediately expressed disbelief. Wangshu is a vasto lord level Manos Grande, where the true Haweko Mundo apex lies. How could this kind of existence be born so easily without the catalyst of Hogyoku and the manipulation of Aizen behind the scenes? Or is Aizen currently in the forest of Manos Grande? Thinking of this possibility, the arms in Du's heart suddenly rose several levels. Nothing could be more exciting than meeting Aizen Sosuke in Haweko Mundo. If you are not careful, you will return to the spirit child state. No, falling into the hands of Aizen doesn't seem to have the option of returning to Link C. Asido on the side took a serious look at Moyu, always feeling that the kid from the Kuchiki family in front of him was not that reliable. Ever since, he turned his attention to Shihoin Yoruichi beside him. Serious expression, serious thinking, stern expression. Sure enough, Shihoin's is relatively reliable. It seems that the woman Shinigami in front of me seems to be the head of the Shihoin family, right? Asido shook his head, realizing that his memory was a little fuzzy. None of this matters. I think you must have misunderstood what I said. The deep voice sounded again, attracting Moyu's attention. What's the meaning? Moyu frowned slightly and looked at Asido. The Wangshu I'm talking about is not a vasto lord level Manos Grande in the sense of the word. Asido looked extremely dignified and gave his own explanation. It's in the real sense, Wangshu. Moyu was taken aback for a moment, his expression blank. He suddenly realized what Wangshu was talking about in Asido's mouth. The vasto lord class Manos Grande, known as the king, rules a part of the area under the sky of Haweko Mundo. The Wangshu of the previous generation was named Baragan Luzenbairn. That is now the second Espada, Skeleton King. However, with the arrival of Aizen in Haweko Mundo, Baragan's rule was completely broken. He has changed from a king to a subordinate, and he has completely declined, and even some problems have appeared in his mentality. But now, Asido actually said that the new Wangshu was born in the forest of Manos Grande. This news was true, which made Moyu a little bit astonished. The birth of Wangshu made the forest of Manos Grande expand its domain. If nothing else happens, the territories of the two Wangzus will collide soon. Asido said solemnly, at that time, Haweko Mundo's vice admiral will have a battle for King Shu. Moyu rubbed his chin, analyzing this possibility in his mind. This newly born Wangshu has some problems with his brain. Even before the opponent's intelligence was clear, they were in a hurry to start a war. Doesn't this make it clear that you want to deliver food to the other party? Is Baragan strong? Having ruled the Zai Palace for thousands of years, it is the real king's office. Wasn't he directly defeated by Aizen and became the second Espada? And even if Aizen is not in the Void Knight Palace now, how can the Arankar Espada in it be broken by a mere Vasto Lord? If the new king robs Arankar, he may be able to escape back. But without Arankar, there is really no way out. After Ejuka's Arankar, his strength has achieved a qualitative leap. Moreover, there are many Vasto Lords in the Void Knight Palace. Their strength is even more outrageous than the other. The forest of Manos Grande expanded, and I am afraid that it will be directly smashed into a sieve. Moyu shook his head and simply forgot about it. He didn't have the mind to pay attention to the fact that he must die. Is this why the forest of Manos Grande expanded? Shihuin Yoruichi asked seriously. When it comes to the safety of this world and the Soul Society, she must find out the real reason. Aceto gave an affirmative answer. The birth of Wang Shu catalyzed the evolution of the virtual group. And this also caused the forest of Manos Grande to expand above the ground. I have investigated many times and got accurate information. Hearing this, Shihuin Yoruichi let out a long breath. If this is the case, then our task will be completed. The so-called Wang Shu, his fate will end soon. She looked at Moyu and suggested, why don't you go back to this world now? It's still a while before the 3-day limit. Moyu pondered for a moment, looking at Nailu who was hanging on her body like a koala in her arms. It seems that there is still a problem that has not been resolved. You guys, aren't you going to prevent this disaster? Seeing that the two of them didn't take this matter to heart at all, Aceto couldn't help asking aloud. Moyu and Shihuin Yoruichi looked at each other, and both saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. Aceto has been in the forest of Manos Grande for so many years, and has no way of knowing the intelligence of the outside world. Moreover, very few people know about the Zai Palace. Even Urahara Kazuki only has a half-knowledge about it. The expansion of the forest of Manos Grande, if only for the purpose of waging war. Moyu looked indifferent, and explained, then the future of this newborn Wang Shu will be an endless abyss. The so-called disaster will never exist. A look of doubt appeared on Aceto's face. Why, could you have seen another Wang Shu? Moyu shook his head, and said in a tone of regret. No, but at the end of the forest of Manos Grande is the Palace of the Night. Among them, the backbone is not much weaker than Soul Society. What Wang Shu initiated was nothing but a journey of self-destruction. What the Void Knight Palace represents is already the ultimate power of Hawako Mundo. Excluding the existence of bug levels like Yamamoto Genryonagi, Zaya Palace will not lose too much to Soul Society. With Manos Grande Forest's level of combat power, facing the Void Knight Palace, it is completely free. Not to mention, the forest of Manos Grande was originally under the jurisdiction of Zai Palace. The so-called Wang Shu may even be just a polished commander. Once the war broke out, all the Zukan under his command turned against him. This kind of picture is very exciting just thinking about it. There was hesitation on Aceto's face. He had no choice but to believe what Moyu said. After all, it was only the first time the two met. If it weren't for his Shinigami identity, Aceto would not have told Moyu the information at all. Moyu seemed to see the concerns in his heart, and explained. This kind of thing, can you change anything with your power? Ejuka's may not be your match, but Vasto Lord can you guarantee defeat? Aceto's strength can be regarded as the upper middle level among many Shinigami. Ejuka's can still be defeated even without Shikai. However, this is far from enough. In the Night Palace, where Jillian walks everywhere, Ejuka's are not as good as dogs. If Aceto gets involved, what awaits him will inevitably be death. Reality is often so cruel. Aceto's expression was a little gloomy, and he was obviously more aware of what Moyu said. With his personal strength, he couldn't participate in it at all. Not only because of Shinigami's identity, but also because of strength. Okay, Yoruichi. Moyu looked at Shihuin Yoruichi on the side, and said, the Black Chamber crossing gate that is about to return. Let's talk. Shihuin Yoruichi didn't set up the portal immediately, but pointed to a koala-like creature in Moyu's arms, and asked. What are you going to do with this little guy? As if sensing the gaze of others, Nailu subconsciously hugged Moyu's body even more tightly. In this frightening death forest, only here can bring him a warm breath. Before she knew it, she had become attached to this aura. Nailu, hearing Moyu's voice, Nailu poked her head out of his arms, looked at him pitifully, and whispered. Moyu doesn't want Nailu. Nailu will be very obedient, don't leave Nailu behind. Seeing this, Moyu looked helplessly at Shihun Yoruichi next to him. It seems that if Nailu is thrown in the forest of Manos Grande, there's a good chance she'll be eaten by other Manos Grande. Shihun Yoruichi put his hands on his hips and leaned slightly in front of Nailu, like a cat protecting food, staring at Nailu in front of him. The biological instinct told her that the little guy in front of her was definitely not as simple as it appeared on the surface. If you bring her back, it is very likely that you will cause yourself some unnecessary troubles. What do you mean? Shihun Yoruichi stood up straight and looked at Moyu. Bring it back to the real world. Moyu explained, I will be stationed in this world for a while. At that time, we will make arrangements for Nailu's whereabouts. Shihun Yoruichi hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, since you said so, let her take it back. However, don't devour human souls in this world. Otherwise, I will divide you to death. The second half of the sentence seemed to be addressed to Nailu. Even after Shihun Yoruichi left the Soul Society, he still kept his responsibilities in mind. Nailu looked at the female Shinigami in front of her with some fear, and nodded. Although she didn't understand what the death penalty Shihun Yoruichi was talking about, it didn't stop her from being afraid. Among those present, it seemed that only Moyu would not hurt her. Everything else is terrible. Shihun Yoruichi began to arrange the black cavity through the world gate, and Kito's dense light bloomed in his palm, embellishing the darkness. The pedestal-style spirit seed fixers are placed on both sides, and the Kito curtain is opened to form a wave of light gate. Different from the black cavity piercing door in the present world, this one is only a one-time use item. Therefore, it will appear relatively crude in structure. The light curtain is fully unfolded, and the construction of the black cavity piercing gate is completed. Okay, you can leave this ghost place. Shihun Yoruichi looked at Moyu and said, let's go. Moyu shook his head, looked at Asido, and said, aren't you going to leave here with us? Hearing this, Asido lowered his eyes slightly and shook his head firmly. I have guessed that most of the voids that appear in this world come from the forest of Manos Grande. As long as the number of ghosts here decreases, the harm to the world will also decrease accordingly. So, can you tell me, is our effort working? Hearing this question, Moyu and Shihun Yoruichi froze in place at the same time. But immediately, when they recalled the changes in this world, their expressions were a little gloomy and dignified. Haweko Mundo. The opening of the Nama War caused the number of ghosts in the world to rise sharply. In the forest of Manos Grande, a new Wangshu was born, and a more tragic war may break out in the future. The pressure of the present world has far exceeded that of the past. Almost all the members of the 13th Division went into battle, and even recruited members from other divisions to purify the world. Although they didn't answer right away, Asido already got the answer from his expression. I understand. Asido lowered his head and put on the antelope mask again. I have been fighting to this day to protect the souls of mankind, and to honor the promises I made with my comrades who fought here together. Afterwards, I will still follow this idea and fight to the end of my life. So, goodbye, both of you. After the words fell, before Moyu could speak, Asido activated Shunpo and disappeared in front of the two of them. This, Shihun Yoruichi and Moyu looked at each other. They are not incomprehensible to Asido's choice, but still admire the idea. Not everyone is able to stick to their decisions and stick to the agreement with their companions in the forest of Manos Grande. This is a lonely and never-ending road. Asido has never even missed the scenery on the side of the road, and has been walking firmly forward. Let's go. Moyu sighed softly. Asido guards the spirit of the dead here. This is its persistence, and it is also the Lado of the soul. After the silence, the two walked through the black cavity portal and left the forest of Manos Grande. Wangshu's fate was already doomed. Challenging the Zai Palace is tantamount to flying moths into a flame. What awaits him will be the abyss of despair. Not long after the two left, Dao's tall figure stepped out of the darkness. The double crescent sickle was carried on the shoulders, exuding a sense of oppression that made the soul stagnate. Fifth espada, Neutra Gilda. Disappeared. How can that disgusting smell disappear? Roaring sounds spread far, far away in the Manos Grande forest, but the surrounding area was still dead silent. No imaginary thus appears. On the sickle in Neutra's hand, blood dripped faintly. The ferocious face was full of cruelty. I see. She left Hueco Mundo and went to the real world. Neutra grinned, her white teeth gleaming coldly. I will never let you go easily. In front of him, the dark space was shattered, like pieces of a puzzle that were constantly separated, revealing a deeper darkness of nothingness. Black cavity, open, Karakura town, Urahara store. Underground secret base. Urahara Kazuki held the unknown tea sent by Tessai Tsukubishi and tasted it leisurely. There is a wave coming from the world transmitting gate, and Hei Yujun came back so soon. Ignoring the tea in his hand, Urahara Kazuki sat on the console in front of him, crackling. After a while, he came to the front of Heikyong's boundary crossing gate. Above the tall portal, spatial fluctuations unfolded, forming fluctuations visible to the naked eye. Like a downpour of rain falling in a calm lake, large and small ripples undulate. Next moment, two figures walked out of it. Welcome back. Before Urahara Kazuki finished speaking, he noticed a loli in Moyu's arms. Wait, Mr. Moyu. His expression gradually became serious, and he asked, what is that in your arms? Looking at his expression, Moyu speculates that Urahara Kazuki may have guessed something about Nailu. For example, the status of Vasto Lord class Manos Grande. Nailu, Ejuka's class Arankar. Moyu said without blushing, I picked it up in the forest of Manos Grande. Very safe. Nailu poked her head out of her embrace, curiously looking at the strange environment around her. It is completely different from the endless, unchanging white desert of Hueco Mundo. Although it is barren here, there are all kinds of facilities, even strange buildings, and existences that are completely different from Shu. Well, it seems to be another Shinigami. Mr. Moyu, although I know this is your private matter. Urahara Kazuki said seriously, but I still want to remind you. The one in your arms. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Moyu. Since you know it's my private matter, Mr. Urahara should not get involved. Thank you for your kindness. What Urahara Kazuki wanted to say was blocked back. He looked at Moyu with a complicated look, and for a long time, he said, you seem to know more than I expected. Moyu put Nailu down, looked at Urahara Kazuki, slightly raised the corners of his mouth, and said with a smile. Everyone has their own secrets, doesn't they? Mr. Urahara. Urahara Kazuki's expression returned to normal, with a smile on his face, and said softly. I see, Mr. Moyu. The communication between the two was like playing a riddle, and Shihoin Yoruichi, who was watching from the side, had questions on his head. But after Moyu's warning, Shihoin Yoruichi seems to understand a truth. Curiosity literally kills the cat. Urahara store. After a short rest, the group returned to the main body of the store on the ground. Tasting the fresh tea in his hand, Moyu directly threw the right to speak to Shihoin Yoruichi. She, who used to be the captain of the second team, must be better at intelligence reporting than him. The reason for the expansion of Manos Grande Forest is that a new Wangshu was born. Urahara Kazuki seemed a little stunned and incomprehensible to this information. Why is Wangshu still born at this point in time? Zai Palace didn't stop it. Urahara Kazuki, caught in his own thoughts, is immersed in his own world. Regarding what happened in Hueco Mundo, it was also difficult for him to be sure for a while. I need new research data. As one of the few top scientific researchers, Urahara Kazuki's professional level in this area is absolutely beyond doubt. After saying sorry, he left the room in a hurry. As for Nailu, he no longer cared about it. Right now, figuring out Hueco Mundo's secret is what he cares about. In that case, it's time for me to say goodbye. Quote. Moyu stood up, ready to go back to the warehouse where he was stationed to take a look. I hope that during this time, Godwood has not been eaten by Manos Grande. Moyu. Nailu ran and jumped into Moyu's arms. After a set of movements, she seemed to be familiar with the process. Leaning her head on Moyu's shoulder, Nailu grinned and waved to Shihuin Yoruichi. Seeing his disappearing figure, Shihuin Yoruichi couldn't help muttering. Moyu, kid, his orientation should be normal, right? But why do I always feel restless? Similarly, she was also lost in thought. Warehouse Station, Shinigami Stronghold. Moyu listened carefully to Mikami Seiki's report during this period. Although there were no accidents, I looked at the guy with a bruised nose and a swollen face and various bandages around his body. He still couldn't help sighing. Zaimu, I've only been away for a little over a day, why did you become like this? Mikami Seiki, who is tall and burly, is like a frightened little chicken in front of Moyu, and he is very odd. It's just that I met a few ordinary ghosts that joined together. An awkward yet polite smile appeared on his face, explaining. Accidentally, I read their way. But don't worry, Mr. Moyu, I've already taken care of those fools. Ah, Moyu sighed softly, waved his hand at him, and said, come closer. Mikami Seiki took a step forward without doubting him. The next moment, Moyu's palm released emerald green light, and the breath of life circulated in the room. Advanced Kaido Reiatsu removal. Emerald green light fell on Sankami Seiki's body. The injuries on his body immediately recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. This. Mikami Seiki opened his mouth wide, full of surprise. Master Moyu, you still know Kaido? Moyu sighed, and replied with some helplessness. Have you forgotten my identity? 3 seats in the 4th team, a serious logistics team. As soon as these words came out, it was as if a thunderbolt sounded in Mikami Jaimu's mind, and he froze in place, his eyes full of bewilderment. 4. Division 4. The performance of Moyu stationed in the present world during this time directly made Mikami Seiki regard him as a godlike existence. In his impression, his captain had never shown such a strong fighting power. So much so that he subconsciously ignored Moyu's original position. The 3rd officer of the 4th division, the real logistics division. Looking at Mikami Seiki, who was caught in doubt about his life, Moyu sighed again. He is very clear that the 4th team is actually not a place where he can stay forever. Whether it is Yamamoto Genryanagi or Kuchiki Yinline, he will not be allowed to stay in the logistics team. This is a waste of its strength. Moyu can already guess that after the end of the stationing, he will be transferred to other teams after returning to Soul Society, and it is not impossible for him to become the vice captain. The life of salted fish is gone forever. Gurgling. A strange voice sounded beside him. Moyu subconsciously looked towards the legs. I saw Nailu raised her small face, showing a happy smile, and said, Moyu, Nailu is hungry. To say such things openly, only Nailu's character would have no scruples. Hungry. Moyu pondered. Shu's food, so there are only other Shuerling you, right? Mikami Seiki on the side carefully looked at Nailu, who looked a little weird. Although Moyu didn't explain it, he could still feel the virtual Reiatsu from this little guy. And when Moyu named Shu's food, he confirmed what he had in mind. The little guy in front of him is definitely the same as the dangerous guy before. Urankar, do not mind the details. Just when Mikami Seiki was frightened by the thoughts in his heart, Moyu said lightly. Nailu is our companion, you just need to remember this. Mikami Seiki nodded and said. Yes, for Moyu's words, he has always carried out unconditionally. Since Lord Moyu said so, there must be Lord Moyu's own reasons. Continue to stay at the stronghold. Moyu held out his hand to Nailu and said, since you're hungry, let's go find some food. Mikami Seiki watched the two leave and continued with his duties. In Karakura town, Moyu took Nailu along and moved quickly through the air. In the current world, the most indispensable thing is emptiness. Finding food or something is simply a simple matter. The virtual direction provided by the divine machine of the order saves the effort of searching for it. However, he still somewhat underestimated Nailu's appetite. After feeding 5 Shu in a row, Nailu still looked hungry. Woo, Moyu. Nailu feels a little bit worse. An indistinct voice came out of her mouth, I will be full soon. Moyu sighed and rubbed Nailu's hair. Half an hour ago, you said that. Quote. Nailu pursed her mouth, rubbed her stomach, and looked at Moyu pitifully. But, Nailu is still very hungry. Moyu stroked his chin, thinking. It seems that we need to find some more powerful ones. Just when the idea arises, Setsuna. horror to the oppressive force of ultimate, instantly descended into Karakura town. Boom! The violent wind blade flew out of the black cavity, instantly cutting off the building in front, and destroying it further away. Perceived. The tall body stepped out of it, and the black pupils were full of crazy emotions. The taste of this Reiatsu, just around the corner. Neutra held the double crescent sickle in his hand, exuding an aura of madness. Unlike Zael Aporo, he did not hide his pressure at all when he entered the world. Even, extremely crazily covered Reiatsu further away. Just to find, the two crescent sickles in his hands subconsciously slashed, and the tall buildings under his feet also collapsed. Even if it is just an unconscious attack, it is a disaster for the present world. Completely ignoring the damage he had caused, Neutra let out a roar in the air, and the madness in his one-eyed eyes fixed on the north direction. In this direction, after the voice fell, Setsuna disappeared in place. In his Setsuna, which came into the world, Moyu first sensed his restless Reiatsu. It's Espada again. His mouth twitched slightly. Twitch, some can't understand. Although Karakura town is a heavy spirit land, is it too much to have Espada descend so frequently? Troubled Karakura town. The moment Neutra Reiatsu moved, Moyu also disappeared in place. The two were rapidly approaching. Urahara Store, Underground Research Institute. Ura Zhao Qian's Hara Kazuki was interrupted by Neutra's Reiatsu, the trial. He walked out of the shop, looking solemnly in the direction where Reiatsu appeared. It's not at the same level as the Espada Rancor of that day. Shihuan Yoruichi rushed to the place where Reiatsu appeared at the first time. Such a dangerous existence must not be faced by you alone. However, no matter how fast she was, she couldn't keep up with the meeting between the two. Finally found you. Neutra stepped in the sky, the double crescent sickle wrapped around his waist hangs upside down, his expression is ferocious and cruel, and his wild killing intent is aimed at Moyu unabashedly. Nailu in her arms. Neutra Gilga. With a distinctive appearance, Moyu immediately recognized the other party's identity. When he heard the words in his mouth, he also directly completed the matter through brain supplementation. In the forest of Manos Grande, Neutra sensed Nelu's Reiatsu and chased him all the way. However, when it comes to the present world, the meaning of things becomes a little different. Rampant guy. Moyu looked cold and murderous. Facing this kind of guy, there is only slaughter. In Setsuna where Moyu Reiatsu stirred up, Neutra finally shifted his attention from Nailu to him. Shinigami. His eyebrows twitched, and he opened his ferocious mouth. Sen's teeth gleamed coldly. What a existence. Anyone standing in front of me deserves to die. Without hesitation, Neutra raised the double crescent sickle in his hand, and slashed towards Moyu's direction. A roar sounded in the sky above Karakura town. Die. Boom. Wild slashing, explosive fall. Above the sky, an endless hurricane was set off, sweeping towards Moyu. In Neutra's crazy eyes, there is an undisguised killing intent. When dealing with the enemy, there is no merciful word in his dictionary. Die. In Setsuna, where the double crescent sickle is about to fall, a blue light flashes across the sky. Rumble. A violent explosion sounded on Neutra's sickle. The strong thrust made it fly out of the sky in an instant, and fell into the ruins of the building like a meteor, stirring up dust that covered the sky and the sun. Seeing this scene, the lightning that bloomed on Moyu's fingers also gradually faded away. This level of attack, he looked in the direction the light came from. On the ground, an orange-haired girl in a school uniform slowly walked out of the smoke. Destroyer. Moyu identified the opponent's identity from the way he attacked. At the same time, after sensing the intensity of the fleeting divine loss, I had a little guess about its name. Who is it? Neutra rushed out of the ruins in an instant, like a rampaging truck, and his raging eyes directly locked on the girl's figure. Another disgusting woman. Since you stand up for this guy, you should die first. He has a ferocious expression, his murderous intent boils, and he starts to move. The next moment, Neutra disappeared in place. Almost instantly, his tall figure appeared directly above the girl. The berserk power erupted from the right leg, directly blasting towards the girl's head. This speed. The girl's pupils contracted, and she only had time to hold her arms in front of her. A strong impact landed on her body, and Setsuna immediately knocked her into the air. Moyu noticed the light-colored veins on the girl's arms that were like lotus roots. Static blood outfit. There is no doubt about the Quincy. And it's still this hair color, this strength. As for the true identity of the girl, he was already sure. Kurosaki Masaki is the only daughter of the Kurosaki family, one of the few pure-blood extermination survivors. Shinigami Setsuna, who Kurosaki Masaki landed on, looked towards Moyu and shouted loudly, "This guy is dangerous, hurry up and take that little guy out of here." The moment she confronted Neutra for the first time, she could confirm that the opponent's strength was not inferior to hers. Due to the sudden engagement and haste, she had already fallen into a disadvantage in the battle. However, at the moment when Moyu shouted to Setsuna, a figure appeared above his head again. Neutra is a despicable guy. In order to achieve the goal of fighting, he will use any means at all. Now that you're slacking off, the victor should be mine. The golden Reiatsu exploded and turned into a slash that tore everything apart. Neutra's one-eyed eyes showed a hint of success, and he slashed down mercilessly. "Those who stand in my way, go to death." Neutra grinned wildly. In his opinion, this attack must be impossible to miss. The disgusting woman in front of me is about to die. However, when his double crescent sickle was less than a foot away, the super nerve detector from Arankar issued a crazy warning. A faint breeze blows behind him. "Escape. If you don't escape, you will die." Neutra forcibly stopped his attack, and abruptly moved his body for a certain distance. However, the wind has come. The bluish-white wind breath turned into an indestructible wind blade, slashing across Neutra's arm. Scoff. Like the sound of cloth being torn, it sounded on his arm. The whisper of the wind, have you ever heard it? A calm voice appeared behind Neutra. Holding Zanpakutō in his hand, Moyu walked slowly towards the crazy guy not far away. "Let you appear in this world. Obviously my share of the fault. Now, let me make amends." As for Neutra, he has absolutely no intention of holding back. Everything that was destroyed in front of him also has a certain relationship with Moyu's negligence. In this regard, Moyu will not shirk. However, right now is the opportunity to make up for it. "Why don't you go?" Kurosaki stared at Moyu nervously, and urged, "Get out of here quickly. That guy is really dangerous. Don't think that you can defeat him because you cut off his CDFG arm in a surprise attack." The simple-minded Kurosaki Masaki, Ishin just wants to keep Moyu away from here. If possible, let's leave the battle to someone stronger. That guy's called Neutra Gilga, Arankar of the Ajukas class. In terms of strength, it is not weaker than Vasto Lord in normal form. Moyu calmly explained, and he came because of my negligence. All the rest, leave it to me to handle. As soon as the voice fell, his figure disappeared in place. When he reappeared, Moyu appeared above Neutra with Zanpakutō in hand. Almost the same attack method, he slashed towards Neutra with a broken arm expressionlessly. Boom! It seems like a light slash, but the power contained in it seems to have exceeded the range of the ground. Neutra hastily responded. The double crescent sickle in his hand had only time to lift halfway, and was directly blasted into the ground by the black jade. Kurosaki Masaki looked at Moyu's attack in surprise, and opened his mouth slightly, looking astonished. Is the Shinigami stationed in the present world already so strong? For the strength that Moyu showed, she couldn't understand it at all. When will Shinigami, who is in charge of a city, be able to rival the existence of the captain level in terms of strength? No, the strength shown by this guy in front of him is even more. The ground collapsed, like a sea wave, surging towards the distance. Countless new soil was dug up, mixed with cement, and this area was directly turned into ruins. Neutra's crazy roar came from under the ground. "Why, guys like you always come out to stop me." Moyu was unmoved by this. It can be called the strongest defense among the Espadas, and Neutra Gilga, who has the hardest steel skin among the Espadas of all dynasties, if he is killed by a slash. Then the Espada becomes a joke. In Setsuna, where his voice fell, a large amount of soil was lifted from the ground, and a mutilated figure flew out of it. Neutra at this moment is completely different from the rampant appearance when he came here, and has become extremely embarrassed. One arm was missing, and on his left shoulder, there was a hideous wound that almost spanned his body, even revealing his internal organs. Shinigami Imp. Neutra stared at Moyu. said, "You have completely angered me." Accompanied by a burst of sizzling sounds, the wounds on his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and a large number of bloody granulations sprouted from them, intertwined and healed his body. Even its arms grew rapidly. Die. Before his arms had fully grown, Neutra suddenly disappeared and slashed at Moyu with double crescent sickles. This way of fighting. Moyu has already known about Neutra's character, and has been wary of this guy from the very beginning. As predicted, the next moment, a violent roar sounded under his sickle. Under its berserk power, the ground made a fragile whine, and collapsed crazily, just like an earthquake. Ha 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 ha. Neutra laughed maniacally. It's finally dead. He who hated Moyu to the bone, finally saw the scene he wanted to see the most. Whose turn is it next? He turned his eyes, searching for the figure of Kurosaki Masaki. However, just when it was about to pull out its sickle from the smoke and dust, something unexpected happened. Neutra tugged several times, but failed to retrieve the scythe. Cold sweat dripped from his brow as he realized something terrible. The attack he was proud of didn't seem to have any effect on that Shinigami kid. Lee Hado 4 ways day and day thunder. An indifferent voice came out from the smoke and dust. The next moment, a crackling sound echoed in the area. The scorching thunder burst, instantly sweeping away all the smoke and dust around. When Neutra saw the scene, his pupils suddenly narrowed to the size of a pinprick. How come? The Zanpakutō in Moyu's hand was caught in the arc of the double crescent sickle. And on his other hand, the index finger stretched out, and a large amount of lightning surged on it, making a piercing sound. There was a burning smell in the air. As Setsuna's voice fell, the lightning from Moyu's fingertips instantly condensed into a huge dazzling pillar of lightning, piercing through the sky. Like a punishment from heaven, it came down to the world. Under the attack of Leizu, the already damaged ground tore a deep gully, spreading to the place where Neutra was. This Reiatsu, in Setsuna, which was about to be pierced by the thunder pillar, Neutra roared unwillingly, "Are you kidding me?" Boom! The thunder pillar exploded, and countless ferocious thunder lights raged, instantly engulfing Neutra completely. The scorching light, like the second sun under the sky, shines on the entire city. Violent thunder and lightning ravaged the area where Neutra was located, and lasted for more than 10 seconds. It wasn't until the thunder faded away that Neutra's voice came out again. This power, how is this possible? In this world, I don't think I will admit that there is a stronger existence than me. Ha! Kill you! After Setsuna finished speaking, the tyrannical golden Reiatsu turned into a beam of light and soared into the sky. Instantly pierced through the clouds above the sky. Neutra completely liberated himself Reiatsu. And his body, which had been turned into charred by the day's thunder, was also shedding a lot of old skin, revealing a complete body. In this case, only high-speed regeneration can restore his fighting power again. The golden Reiatsu beam of light trembles, making it. The surrounding space trembled because of this. Before the beam of light faded away, Moyu felt a strong pull from Zanpakutō. Before he could react, the double crescent sickle stuck on his Zanpakutō was directly drawn away by Neutra. Next moment, the tall body has already come to Moyu. The huge double crescent sickle cut down again. Neutra completely unleashed his own strength, slashed wildly, and landed on Moyu's body. With golden Reiatsu, Neutra reaches its peak. Die, die, die. The crazy roar echoed on the ruins. The sound of gold and iron interlacing, also accompanied by the sound of slashing, resounded continuously. Facing Neutra's crazy attack, Moyu still maintained a calm and indifferent posture. Do you want to kill him with this level of attack? What are you kidding? What is the purpose of the Fist Slayer Ghost training day and night? Is it to let a mere fifth espada easily beat? Non-existent. A cold light flashed in Moyu's purple eyes, and he turned his wrist, which became even more fierce. Let's see the real way of fighting. A gust of wind rises and sweeps across the sky. The bluish-white breath of wind wrapped around the blade, circling upwards. Death comes to you like the wind. Moyu raised his voice slightly, blade mad lan. After Setsuna's voice fell, the sweeping bluish-white wind stagnated in the air, as if the pause button had been pressed, stagnating around the blade. However, before Neutra could rejoice, they roared towards them with a more rapid attitude. The breath of the wind turned into a wind blade, tearing apart the sky with an unsolvable attitude. Neutra's pupils shrank suddenly, and subconsciously placed the sickle in his hand in front of him. In Setsuna, where the wind blade was attacking, the nerve probe from Arrancar issued a warning of madness again. Block it, block it, block it. The breath of death enveloped and devoured him, as if fate had already waved towards him. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. The terrifying sound erupted directly from Setsuna where the two collided. A terrifying blast of air swept through the ruins within a radius of several miles. As a result, the ground was cut to a depth of hundreds of meters, forming a huge hole like a tionking. Neutra's Reiatsu also disappears because of this. Mama! Bright red blood dripped down, and Neutra looked at his crippled body in horror, and his narrow pupils were full of fear. He was almost completely killed. In his hand, the double crescent sickle was cut off in the middle and lost its brilliance. Reiatsu also becomes weak here. If the attack just now was stronger, then what greeted him must be true despair. Neutra has grown from the weakest to the most powerful among Arrancar Espada and Hueco Mundo. He has been through countless battles. But no matter which time, he defeated and devoured his opponent and turned it into a stepping stone to strengthen himself. As the death gesture that symbolizes despair in Espada, he actually felt the indescribable despair in the body of a Shinigami. Ha ha ha. Neutra let out a crazy laugh, blood sprayed out from his mouth, and the whole person looked crazy and terrifying. This is the battle I want. Neliel, did you see that? He roared to the sky, his tiny pupils seemed to be full of madness. This is the real battle. As the voice fell, the golden Reiatsu shot up into the sky. The damaged double crescent sickle in Neutra's hand was raised high, and the golden Reiatsu condensed into a beam of light visible to the naked eye, turning into a burning flame, illuminating the sky of Karakura town. The form of death that symbolizes despair descends into the present world. I will prove that the strongest existence is named. Neutra Gilda. Pray, holy weeping mantis. The golden Reiatsu swept everything around, and the wild flames directly swallowed it completely, and the dust covered the sky and buried the place where Neutra was. With such a serious injury, he can still fight. A hint of worry flashed in the bright eyes of Kurosaki Masaki, who was watching from a distance. The other party is really a monster. Moyu will definitely win. A weak but firm voice sounded beside him. Kurosaki Masaki lowered his head and looked at Nailu beside him, with a somewhat complicated expression. When I learned that the Shinigami named Moyu fought against such a terrifying monster in order to protect the little guy in front of me. Her perception of Shinigami has also changed. It turns out that Shinigami are not all horrible existences who only know about slaughter. Kurosaki Masaki forcefully squeezed out a smile, and said in relief. Well, Mr. Moyu will definitely win. After all, she turned her eyes to the direction where the army was fighting. At the same time, a slender lynx bow is condensed in its palm, and Reiatsu is dense on it, ready to go. Obviously, she is ready to rescue Moyu at any time. Even now, Moyu still has the upper hand. And that's because the guy's Reiatsu at the center of the giant pothole is just too scary. The thick cloud layer in the sky tore out a huge gully, surging in all directions. Below, the golden yellow Reiatsu remains undiminished, and even radiates further away. In order to kill Moyu, Neutra completely freed himself and cast Returning Blade. Returning to the blade, Arrancar transformed his physical body into its original posture and returned to the strongest attack ability. The Reiatsu beam of light gradually dissipated, and a huge crescent moon appeared in the smoke and dust, as if the moon was falling from the sky. Just looking at the scene in front of him gives people a feeling of insignificance. The breeze blows in and the dust disperses. Neutra's insolent posture is also displayed in front of Moyu. The crescent-shaped sharp horns pierced through the head, crossed yellow facial lines slipped off the crazy face, and the eye mask turned into teeth, biting the empty holes in itself, and the forearms were all holding with a double-edged sickle. Powerful and terrifying. Although the external Espada uniform has been dilapidated, it looks a bit embarrassed. But the injuries on his body have completely healed, and even the wounds have disappeared. Ha, how is it? Neutra grinned, revealing a stern white fang. It's the first time I saw Espada's sword liberation. Do you feel hopeless? Contrary to its form, Moyu held Zanpakutō upside down, looking calm and calm. Since you have returned to the blade, Then if I don't pay more attention to it, it would be a little too contemptuous of you. While speaking, he placed the Zanpakutō in his hand in front of him, and said softly, "Tear apart the sky and sweep through Senluo. Lan Yin." With the fall of his voice, a bluish-white wind rose from the ground centered on Moyu. It turned into a violent tornado, devouring the few clouds above the sky. Reiatsu stirred, responding to Neutra's provocation. The strong wind blew past, adding a few more scars on the ruins. The wind died down. Moyu's figure is displayed in the bluish-white wind. In his hand, Zanpakutō, which has turned into a haze, is engraved with a bluish-white wind mark. Looking at the slender blade, Reiatsu is dense and the wind is compelling. In this way, the battle is much more fair. Moyu lightly waved Zanpakutō in his hand, the wind suddenly blew up, and several deep ravines split open on the ground under his feet. Seeing Moyu's changing momentum, Neutra was slightly taken aback. "This is what you call a fair fight? Why did I liberate the sword? You can too." The guy who couldn't do it before, now has the word despair engraved on his face. He never thought that when Moyu fought with him before, he never used his full strength. It wasn't until Moyu liberated Zanpakutō that Neutra realized the real difference in power between the two. "But," Neutra grinned wildly, "what about liberating Zanpakutō? Victory will only belong to me after all." As soon as the voice fell, Neutra directly started the ring and disappeared in place. The next moment, the double-edged sickle swung down with the golden Reiatsu. When the sound of gold and iron intertwined echoed above the ruins, Neutra's eyes widened, watching everything that happened in front of him in disbelief. The 4 double-edged sickles slashed down at the same time, but they were actually blocked by the opponent's slashing power. The attack of the Shinigami kid in front of him happened to be stuck on a weird node. Moyu looked up slightly, with a smile on the corner of his mouth, looked directly at Neutra, and said with a smile, "This is the correct way to open the battle. Fighting on instinct is nothing but the behavior of wild beasts. In fact, in his previous life, he was inseparable. Why is Zaraki Kenpachi's beast-like fighting behavior always sought after by countless people? Hana Retsu's art-like kendo skills are easily surpassed by him. Later, I just learned that all this stems from Zaraki Kenpachi's own strength. However, the potential contained in kendo itself is not inferior to that of Zaraki Kenpachi itself. If fighting skills developed for thousands of years are no match for instinctive fighting, wouldn't it be a big joke? The potential of kendo far exceeds instinct. This is the difference between man and beast." "Are you kidding me?" Neutra yelled. "Mere Shinigami, what about the right fight?" Scoff. With all 4 arms, he stretched Moyu's Zanpakutō directly. "Only the victor deserves to talk about fighting. The crazy posture is like a praying mantis hunting." The jagged forelimbs blocked all possible escape directions for Moyu, tearing through the air. When the crisp sound resounded through the ruins again, the violent power surged, forming a shock wave visible to the naked eye, which radiated in all directions. Under the shock wave, the few remaining buildings turned into ruins and collapsed. Neutra's eyes were full of disbelief. He couldn't understand how his own attack would be resisted by the pressure of sin again. Obviously this time they are attacking in 4 different directions. How come? I will never admit that the winner must be me. Neutra made a roar, like a wounded beast. Just as Setsuna, whose actions were stalemate, opened his mouth suddenly. The golden Reiatsu instantly condensed and turned into a small ball, suspended above the tongue with the number 5 inches engraved on it. Wang Shu's flash, Neutra's most powerful form of attack. At such a close distance, it is impossible to dodge the past. Excitement flashed in his eyes, as if he had seen the scene where Moyu was penetrated by Sero. And the fact is just as he expected. Setsuna burst out with a golden beam of light, directly piercing the figure in front of him. "Ha ha ha ha, it's finally dead." Neutra laughed maniacally. "It's just a piece of trash who only knows how to talk. Victory, after all, still belongs to me. Speak. Don't talk too much." The moment the indifferent voice appeared, Neutra's laughter stopped abruptly. He turned his head stiffly to the back, only to see you standing not far away intact. "No, it's impossible. I clearly." When he looked in front of him again, a little remaining cloth slowly fell from the air. Sifung's secret footwork 3 empty cicada. "That's the difference between you and me. Moyu said calmly, beasts are beasts after all. His words ignited the anger in Neutra's heart again. Its figure flashed and appeared beside Moyu in an instant. The 4 double-edged sickles in his hand slashed towards Moyu in different directions again. Boom! The powerful force caused the ground to collapse, and the soil surged up like waves. The two sides were at a stalemate again. However, this posture did not last for too long. A vicious look flashed in Neutra's one eye, and there was a rattling sound from his abdominal cavity. Immediately, a cold glow went straight towards Moyu. Boom! Sensing the abnormal movement from his arm, Neutra's eyes widened, his expression a little dazed. Moyu put his left hand in front of his body, blocking the arm that suddenly protruded from his abdomen. Nothing is impossible. He still had a smile on his face. Neutra Gilga, your 6 arms have been no secret since the beginning. Remark 1. It even set off a turbulent sea in Neutra's heart. All opponents who have seen his 6 arms died under his hands. How did this hateful Shinigami who had never met before me know? So what if you know? Neutra manipulated the arm protruding from the abdominal cavity, and suddenly stabbed towards Moyu's chest. It was so fierce that it even made a sonic boom in the air. However, when it was less than an inch away from Moyu, the space in front of it was full of stagnation. It's like being in a quagmire, and with a slight movement, you will feel endless resistance. Neutra, Moyu whispered, did you hear that? Hearing this, Neutra raised his eyes, with a hint of puzzlement in his angry expression. Got windy. Amidst the sound of the wind, it announced your return journey. As the voice fell, Lanyin in Moyu's hand suddenly circled upwards, emitting a bluish-white violent wind. Caught off guard, Neutra's double-edged sickle was directly bounced off. The wind suddenly picked up. Moyu turned the blade of the knife in his hand and held it backwards in his palm. This formula is called Slay Evil. Lanyin slashed upwards, and the wind blade that traversed the sky and the earth flew out of it. The clouds in the sky were torn apart, and the soil on the ground was broken. The bluish-white wind blade pierced through Neutra's body instantly with unstoppable speed. The golden reiatsu on its body gradually faded away. Neutra's pupils dilated, his expression faded, and his consciousness became blurred. After all, is it still here? It turns out that this is death. He knelt down powerlessly on the ground, and bloodstains appeared on his body, running through his entire body. Watching Neutra, whose breath gradually disappeared, Moyu remained calm. For this guy, he is not pitiful. All his life, he has been pursuing to die in the hands of the strong, to die in battle. Now, Moyu took advantage of the situation and beheaded him, which can be regarded as fulfilling his lifelong wish. This is the destination of despair. Hearing this last sentence, Neutra's eyes lighted up slightly, and finally lost all vitality. Your Li Hado 4 ways thunder of the day was seriously injured. Neutra Gilga, the mood is excited, the efficiency of practice is doubled, and the power is increased by 100%. Because your Gale Sword Dao crushed Neutra Gilga in combat skills, you feel happy, your comprehension greatly increases, and you comprehend new sword skills. Your Zanpakutō is satisfied because of killing Neutra Gilga, the degree of compatibility has increased, the comprehension of oneself has been further advanced, and the potential is being stimulated. Because your Reiatsu beat Espada for the second time, your confidence has improved, your understanding has greatly increased, and you have comprehended a new realm ultimate Reiatsu. The late system notification sound made Moyu stunned. He never imagined that the battle with Neutra would actually improve his strength so much. Among them, the improvement of Day and Day Thunder and Gale Sword Dao has become second. Most importantly, Zanpakutō Lanyin changed, and Reiatsu realized a new realm. Zanpakutō is closely related to himself, and even the slightest change involves Moyu himself. More importantly, when he used Zanpakutō Shikai to fight, he always felt that Lanyin's potential was not limited to this. With this promotion, Moyu somehow sensed that Lanyin still has a second Shikai form. Maybe it won't be long. With Lanyin's cultivation efficiency, it will be enough to dig it out. As for the changes on Reiatsu, it involves the root of Shinigami. Some great schemer once said that Shinigami's battles are Reiatsu's battles. The display of all abilities will ultimately be based on the strength of the Reiatsu level. No matter how strong the ability is, if Reiatsu can't do it, it can't even break the enemy's defense. For specific performance, you can refer to 983, Sui Feng. Suzumaki, a 2-hit kill, was completely useless against someone taller than her in Reiatsu. In this case, the stronger the Reiatsu, the stronger the power side will be. Moyu is very curious about the changes in his own strength. But right now is not the time to test, there are more important things waiting for him to deal with. Neutra's death caused its Reiatsu to scatter around. This time, no negation showed up to save him. As a scientific researcher, Zale Aporo is very aware of his level of combat power, so he usually prepares various means to prevent accidents. And negation is the most critical means for him to save himself. Neutra doesn't have as many ideas as he does. He just wanted to kill Nailu, or be killed by Nailu. This time, Neutra's purpose was finally achieved. Although she didn't die in the hands of Nailu, she died in the hands of the strong after all. From beginning to end, Neutra, as the 5th Espada, has only one purpose. That is fighting without any reason. Become stronger in the battle, and finally die in the hands of the stronger. Since you are dead, let's use the last bit of residual heat. Moyu looked at the lifeless Neutra with a calm expression, and said indifferently, atonement for your mistakes. After the words fell, Lanyan raised his hand. The wind between heaven and earth suddenly changed its shape and direction, heading towards the hill in Moyu's hand. Kurosaki Masaki brought Nailu to the other side and landed beside Moyu, looking at him curiously. You are. The corner of Moyu's mouth slightly raised, and said, a special method designed to address this guy's past mistakes. The wind swept over. Something that shocked Kurosaki Masaki happened. Neutra's Reiatsu, which had already begun to dissipate, was forcefully squeezed into the body again. Although its soul is gone, this massive Reiatsu remains. Wind breath can stop Reiatsu. Moyu explained, and this Reiatsu is just reserved for Nailu as food. Instead of letting this Reiatsu return to the present world, it is better to stay and help Nailu recover. Although Neutra is only an Arankar of Ijuka's class, it is one of Espada after all. In terms of Reiatsu, it is not much weaker than Vasto Lord. Under Moyu's control, the violent wind became orderly. They squeeze all the Reiatsu towards the center. After a while, it was compressed into a spherical shape, and it kept shrinking. Nailu, open your mouth. Although she didn't know what was going on in front of her eyes, Nailu, who was already extremely dependent on Moyu, opened her mouth subconsciously when she heard his voice. Wait a minute. Just when the high compression ball Reiatsu was about to be swallowed by Nailu, Kurosaki Masaki hastily opened his mouth to stop him. Such a huge Reiatsu, if Nailu swallows it, there may be problems. Obviously, she knew nothing about Nailu's appetite. Relax, Moyu comforted, I am very experienced in feeding. What are you kidding? Gold medal chef, are you kidding me? Think how many people watched him operate and said they couldn't eat anymore. For this aspect, Moyu is still very confident. Come on, open your mouth. Moyu handed the Reiatsu ball to Nailu again. Nailu opened her mouth obediently, almost engraving the word cute on her face. Kurosaki Masaki looked at the scene in front of her with a worried face. For the Reiatsu that Neutra exploded just now, she saw everything in her eyes. Can such a huge Reiatsu be eaten by such a small guy? Grunt. With a soft sound, Yuan Macho was completely eaten by Nailu. Next moment, emerald green light emanates from its body, and powerful oppression is constantly emerging from it. Nailu stretched out her hands curiously, looking at her own changes in puzzlement. What's the matter, Nailu? Feel the warmth of the body. Kurosaki Masaki's eyes widened, and an expression of disbelief appeared on her delicate face. Wow, how come? There's nothing wrong at all. The scene in front of her was completely beyond her comprehension. However, Moyu frowned slightly and looked at Nailu very seriously. Looks like nothing has changed. From the current point of view, Nailu has just changed from ordinary Nailu to shining Nailu. The Reiatsu distributed is also a little stronger than before. However, the flashing Nailu and the like really look a bit dazzling. Wow, Nailu will shine. Nailu seemed to be very happy about her changes. Is Nailu still hungry? Moyu rubbed her short hair and asked with a smile. Hearing this, Nailu subconsciously looked at her little belly and rubbed it curiously. Nailu is not hungry anymore. So amazing. Immediately, she raised headed up, looked at Moyu with a smirk, and said happily. Moyu is the best. The current changes in Nailu did not exceed Moyu's expectations. As a Vasto Lord Arankar, Nailu is far superior to Neutra in terms of strength. A Reiatsu of Neutra is simply not enough for a full recovery. Right now, more accumulation of Reiatsu is needed or a long wait. When Masaki Kurosaki saw the scene before him, the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, and he smiled sincerely. Now that you are all safe, then it's time for me to say goodbye. As she spoke, she looked at Moyu, tilted her head slightly, and said with a smile, "You are the strangest Shinigami I have ever seen." "Of course, the kindest one. See you again." As soon as the words fell, the spiritual particles under her feet gathered to form a high-speed movement, and soon disappeared in front of Moyu and Nailu. Flying Scythe Foot, a high-speed movement footwork for Quincy, similar to Shinigami's Shunpo, but faster. Highly proficient people can even use this to surpass the virtual ring. Looking at his disappearing figure in an instant, Moyu's smile gradually calmed down. Troubled Karakura town. Behind him, there are endless ruins. Even if he tried his best to control his Reiatsu and attack strength, it still caused irreparable damage to Karakura town. And these things are naturally reported to Seraite. "Let's go, Nailu, let's go home." Moyu gestured with his hand. Nailu raised her head and looked at Moyu, her expression slightly startled. Immediately, a bright smile appeared on her face, and she nodded heavily. I don't know why, but as long as Moyu is around, everything seems less scary." Karakura Town Shinigami Stronghold. In the room, one person and one cat looked at each other with big eyes and small eyes, and Nailu looked back and forth between them curiously. Moyu picked up Nailu casually, threw her out of the room, and played in the warehouse. Then he returned to the table and continued to stare at the black cat. After a long time, the black cat on the table sighed helplessly, breaking the silence. "Isn't this battle a little too much?" Moyu spread his hands and said helplessly. "That Neutra guy is one of the Espadas. I don't want to die, I can only fight with all my strength. With such a level of fighting, if I am a little negligent, I probably won't be able to see you." Hearing Moyu's defense, Shihoin Yoruichi seemed even more troubled. She knew very well that Moyu was right. And the root of all this is not in Moyu. No one expected the sudden arrival of Neutra. It was an accident. But the accident happened, which led to the occurrence of successive events. Seraite learned about the situation of Karakura town, after reporting to the first team. Yamamoto Motoyanagi directly held a captain meeting. If there is no accident, there will be a captain and a vice-captain coming to Karakura town in the near future. In addition, there are a large number of Shinigami coming to solve the problems left by Karakura town. This situation may last for a while. And this also means that Karakura town is no longer as safe as usual. Urahara store and visored traces, most likely discovered by Shinigami. It seems that the shielding effect on Kido's barrier needs to be strengthened. Shihoin Yoruichi sighed. The best solution right now is naturally to jointly expose Ty Lee and improve the enchantment path. It's not a big problem. Moyu explained. Ordinary Shinigami don't have the ability to detect the existence of the Urahara store. As for the Vizards, any one of them is a captain-level existence, and it's even harder to be discovered. The key lies in the captain and deputy captain who came to this world to take charge. As long as it's not. He didn't go on, but Shihoin Yoruichi already understood what Moyu meant. What he said must be Aizen and Ichimaru Jin. If these two guys appear in Karakura town, they will definitely be able to find clues. At that time, let alone Visored, even if it is the Urahara store, it will definitely be found by it. Switch from dark to bright. The risk, the increase is not a little bit. There is always a solution to a problem. Moyu looked calm, looked at the restless black cat in front of him calmly, and comforted him. Don't you understand this truth? He stretched out his hand and stroked the cat unceremoniously. For his disrespectful behavior, Shihoin Yoruichi just gave him an annoyed look, and then enjoyed someone's cat-stroking behavior with peace of mind. This is where Moyu was able to jump right in. As long as it is another person, I am afraid that before touching the cat hair, will be directly pawed down. The crux of the problem is that we have no way to crack Aizen's Kyoku Suigetsu. If there is a fight with him, he will definitely be easily defeated by him. Shihuin Yoruichi said rather helplessly. Looking at the confident black cat, Moyu sighed softly. He really wanted to say, "Don't worry, even without Kyoka Suigetsu's ability, there aren't many in Seraite that can fight Aizen. As for the few in this world, all added up, they can't resist a few knives. The Reiatsu that is so terrifying to ultimate alone is enough to make a captain-level Shinigami lose the ability to fight. One captain for one knife, not joking at all. Even Moyu's Reiatsu so far has comprehended a new realm. But he still doesn't have the confidence to face Aizen. Without developing to ultimate, Moyu is not going to face that kind of scary guy. Okay, that's it for today." Shihuin Yoruichi jumped out of Moyu's hand. Shukang's body turned into a human form. "Stupid cat, can't you pay attention to your image?" Moyu covered his face with his hands, quite helpless. "Although it's pretty, but it's not like this every time you come to him, right? My body can't stand it." Shihuin Yoruichi picked up Moyu's shirt and put it on, saying indifferently, "What are you afraid of? Anyway, you, a nasty brat, can see it." As she spoke, she suddenly lowered her body and whispered in Moyu's ear. "So, don't you really want to be surrounded by Big Sister right now?" "I don't mind." After finally getting rid of the crazy black cat, Moyu sat back on the soft sofa and thought about another problem. Shihuin Yoruichi knew that something was wrong with Nailu, but she didn't know her identity. But Aizen is different. Aizen knows the former number 3 Espada very well. Even Nelu's Arankar once borrowed the power of Hogyoku. If it discovers Nailu's existence, although there may not necessarily be a problem, it will be a hidden danger after all. Oh, there is no solution. After thinking for a long time, Moyu had to give up. With his current ability, it is simply not enough to solve the current problem. As for the captain who came to the present world, it was not enough to worry him. Anyway, as long as it's not Aizen, anyone else can handle it easily. Zilla, Zilla, Zilla. The voice from the messenger machine interrupted Moyu's train of thought. Moshi Moshi. Moyu picked up the magic messenger and said relaxedly, "Seimu, are you in any trouble again?" "No, Master Moyu." Mikami Seiki's tone sounded a little nervous. Karakura town is located at 2438, southeast of No 1236, and there is a gate to open. Shinigami of Seraite, come. Moyu was slightly startled. He didn't expect Seraite to be so efficient this time. Not long after the notification, the Shinigami have already arrived. Hanging up the magic machine of the messenger, Ryu went directly to the direction mentioned by Mikami Naoda. He is still very curious about the captain and vice captain that Seraite sent this time. If it is someone he is familiar with, then everything is easy to talk about. But if you run into 2 stunned young people, such as a big dog or something, things will probably be a little troublesome. Good luck. In the air, figures shuttled past Karakura town. The designated location is 2438, southeast of No. 1236. Mikami Seiki looked nervously at the quaint sliding door on the open space ahead. After sensing the Reiatsu coming from it, he was still in awe. Black butterflies fluttered out of the world-transmitting gate. Immediately, a team of Shinigami wearing death-fighting outfits stepped out of it in one order. The first thing Mikami Seiki noticed was the strange way these Shinigami wore the Death Fighter outfit. He was covered tightly in black clothes, like a ninja, with only his eyes exposed. When he saw such attire, Shang Jaimu immediately realized the seriousness of the situation. Without him, it is only because of the name of its second team. A stealth mobile unit, specialized in dark side missions. The appearance of this group of Shinigami often means the severity of the situation. Are you the Shinigami stationed in this world? At the moment when Mikami Jaimu was stunned, a petite figure walked up to him and asked with a stern look. Where is Kuchiki Moyu now? I have something, I need to ask about it. When he saw the figure in front of him, Mikami Seiki felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar, shrouded in a severe chill. The person in front of him seemed to be exuding a cold-killing intent all the time. When Mikami Seiki was about to answer, he felt the warmth coming from behind him, helping him to dissipate the severe chill. I really didn't expect the captain to send you here. Moyu looked at the petite figure in front of him with some headaches, and said helplessly. Edo ancient hair bun, ring bell snake braid hanging behind, cold and expressionless face, petite body, and the Wengsao logo on his shoulder. Its identity has been stated. Sui Feng is the captain of the 2nd Division, the chief of the criminal army and the captain of the 1st Division, and the commander-in-chief of Secret Mobile. Moyu had calculated thousands of times, but he didn't think that Yamamoto Yuanliusai would send Sui Feng to the world. It stands to reason that the 2nd team is responsible for dark tasks, such as assassination, intelligence gathering and the like. All in all, it's just something that can't be seen. But the current situation in Karakura town obviously needs more professional people to deal with it. Can these guys who can only fight and kill really complete it? As if seeing Moyu's doubts, Sui Feng explained in a very formulaic tone. The other teams have their own tasks. Right now, the only ones who are free are the 2nd team. However, facing this answer, Moyu just looked at Sui Feng very seriously with an expression of looking foolish. Do you really think everyone is an idiot? This is just the stupid big guy next to Mikami Seiki fooling around. But anyone who has a little understanding of Seoul society will not believe Sui Feng's nonsense. Among Gotei 13, if you choose one of the busiest fan teams, it must be the 2nd fan team. Moyu once visited the 2nd Division team building, so he went there with Byakuya Kuchiki to deal with some affairs. In the team building, almost all the teams came and went in a hurry. The exposed eyes are full of rush and tension. After walking around for a while, Moyu only felt that the entire 2nd team was like a string stretched to the limit, which might break at any time. However, Sui Feng actually said that the only ones who are free right now are the 2nd team. Isn't this a fool? Only a fool would believe it. However, Moyu glanced sideways inadvertently, and saw Mikami Seiki nodded in confidence. Sure enough, one shouldn't have any hope for this fool. Sui Feng was terrified by Moyu's gaze. She is very aware that there are loopholes in her words, but this is the best excuse she can think of. In order to lead the team to the present world, she even did not hesitate to assign the task of this team of soldiers directly to the people of the Feng family. Ahem. Sui Feng coughed softly, hiding his embarrassment, trying to turn the page over. Moyu 3 seats, for Karakura town follow-up to make up, this team Shinigami will be in charge. In addition, I need to know the details of the previous battle and the specific identity of the opponent. She tried to hide her panic. Time, place, process, cause. All of this needs to be detailed. Sui Feng looked serious and imposing. If you change to someone else, you will definitely be bluffed by him. But Moyu didn't put it on new in the slightest. From the very beginning when this guy appeared in this world, his purpose has already gone astray. Tell you there is no problem. Moyu lowered his eyes slightly, and looked at him, but you have to tell me. What is your real purpose in this world? Just when Sui Feng was struggling, a hearty laughter came from among the team members. Really? Under Moyu's puzzled eyes, a tall, slim orange-haired beauty walked out of it and came to him very familiarly. Handsome little brother of the Kuchiki family, stop embarrassing our little Sui Feng. Vice captain of the 10th Division, Matsumoto Rangaku. One high and one low, one flat and one convex, autistic and one extroverted. Two completely opposite people came to Karakura town as dispatch Shinigami at the same time. The deputy captain mentioned in the order, could it be you? Moyu also couldn't fully understand the appearance of Matsumoto Rangaku. Why, this guy will appear here. Jade is not high. Matsumoto Rangaku put his hand on his forehead and said with a rather sad gesture, you seem to be very prejudiced against me. Before Moyu could respond, she smiled and said, actually, it was me and the captain who were in charge of this mission. But Sui Feng suddenly recommended herself, and she must come to this world, and the captain gave her this task. The captain is very keen on being lazy. There was a hint of ridicule in Matsumoto Rangaku's tone. Clearly, she's on the same side as Moyu. She was also very curious about Sui Feng's sudden request for a job. Logically speaking, with Sui Feng's personality, he would never easily cause trouble for himself. However, this time, seeing the strange gazes of the two, Sui Feng felt more and more awkward in his heart, and his cold expression also changed slightly. Don't think too much. He stuttered and couldn't think of a suitable reason when it came to the back. Seeing this scene, Moyu seemed to have a bad guess about Sui Feng's appearance. Gone. Isn't this guy here because of that stupid cat? Thinking of this, cold sweat rolled down Moyu's forehead. No one knows Sui Feng's feelings for Shihuan Yoruichi better than him. Back then, when Shihuan Yoruichi specially taught him Shunpo, Sui Feng always looked at him with jealousy. After Shihuan Yoruichi left Soul Society, Sui Feng came to Kuchiki's house alone and asked him if he knew the whereabouts of Shihuan Yoruichi. Although Moyu prevaricated at the time, Sui Feng was obviously not reconciled to this. With a resolute personality, she has talked to him many times on various occasions. Moyu once thought that if it wasn't for his identity as Kuchiki, Sui Feng would definitely arrest him for punishment and hearing. This girl's attitude towards that stupid cat is already close to a certain kind of obsession. Every time we meet, the first thing Sui Feng does is definitely ask about Shihuan Yoruichi. Now is not the time for small talk. Sui Feng forcibly changed the topic. We must hurry up and carry out the task. All soldiers, act. She directly turned her back to the two of them and gave orders to the soldiers. But Moyu was behind him and saw Sui Feng's reddish earlobe. Sure enough, she is a proud and arrogant person with a hard mouth on the surface and a shame on the inside. If possible, I would like to know more. Before Moyu finished speaking, he saw that Sui Feng's earlobe was already red. She said stubbornly, "No reason." Matsumoto Rengoku stood beside Moyu, elbowed him, and said, "Moyu, here comes your trouble." Hearing this, Moyu gave her an annoyed look. Until now, he hadn't figured out what the woman Matsumoto Rengoku was thinking. Ever since the incident of Yuhan's burial, she has been very concerned about herself. Not only let Shiba Isshin personally come forward to win him over to join the Juban team, but every time they meet, he looks familiar. Obviously we only met a few times. Sui Feng left here in a hurry, giving orders and carrying out tasks in the ruins of Karakura town. For battles that take place in this world, generally speaking, they are unavoidable. But Shinigami try to minimize the impact of combat on reality. Otherwise, it will cause panic among the human beings in the present world, which is also a great trouble. Moyu and Neutra. The battle has a wide range. In addition to dealing with some special battle traces, it is also necessary to change the memory of human beings in this world. Some humans with powerful souls can even see Shinigami fighting. Although this kind of existence is rare, it is a trouble after all. With Mikami Seiki's ability alone, it may take a long time to solve the current troubles in Karakura town. So, the spirit side sent a Shinigami squad. Sui Feng's departure made Matsumoto Rengoku more accommodating. Brother Moyu, take me to where you live." She smiled and said, "There are some problems, it's not suitable for Sui Feng to hear them." Moyu's mind moved. Did he finally get to the point? From the looks of it, Matsumoto Rengoku came to this world not by accident. In this regard, Moyu did not refuse. He also wanted to know why Matsumoto Rengoku had such an attitude. Shinigami stronghold. In the room, Moyu brought out the tea and pushed it in front of the mahogany table. "Speak, Miss Rengoku. I'm very curious about your question." Hearing this, Matsumoto Rengoku was slightly startled, the corners of his mouth raised, and he said softly, "Calling Ms. Rengoku is a bit too pretentious, just call Rengoku." Facing his temptation, Heiyu remained unmoved. Matsumoto Rengoku is a person he knows quite well. She seems to be forthright, but she is definitely extremely delicate and serious in terms of character. Seeing that Moyu didn't express anything, Matsumoto Rengoku sighed, and his attitude suddenly became more serious. "Actually, during this time, I have been collecting information about the soul burial practice that day, and secretly investigating various details." Hearing this, Moyu's heart was moved immediately. Could it be that Matsumoto Rengoku sensed a glimmer of vision? The members of the 10th squad were in charge of the soul burial practice at that time. Matsumoto Rengoku showed a hint of unwillingness in his eyes. After the accident, many team members, including the 3 chief executives, were exiled to the place of death. As the deputy team, I must find the truth for the team members. Looking at Matsumoto Rengoku with an extremely serious expression, Moyu suddenly realized that this guy was not joking. Seeing that Moyu did not speak, Matsumoto Rengoku continued. At that time, the place where the soul burial was practiced was surveyed by a number of Shinigami and re-examined by 3 chief officers. After confirming that there is no problem many times, the place for the soul burial practice was just decided. The Manos Grande who appeared at the internship site of the soul burial in this world seemed to appear out of thin air, without any movement. Even the Technology Development Bureau failed to receive the Reiatsu wave that the black cavity opened. Hearing this, Moyu's heart moved. Under the Technology Development Bureau or the Communication Technology Research Section and the Lingbo Measurement Research Section. Among them, the Research Institute of Lingbo Measurement is responsible for detecting the Reiatsu activity capture of the real world, and the opening position of the fixed point of the black cavity. Normally speaking, with the current level of the Technology Development Bureau, it is impossible not to discover the opening of the black cavity. And this point just confirmed the fact that the 10th Division Shinigami team members made mistakes in their duties, which led to the death of dozens of students of the Spirit Art Academy. Unfortunately, the dozens of students of the Spirit Art Academy are not all Rukongai civilians. Among them, there are many lower nobles of Seraite, upper nobles, and even members of the 5 major nobles. This also led to a lot of pressure on the Guardian fan team and the Spiritual Art Academy. When the culprit could not be found, the Shinigami team member responsible for the incident was finally punished. 3 officers, many Shinigami soldiers, were sent directly to the place of death. Although the result of this trial did not satisfy everyone, it finally gave an answer. Under the deterrence of Yamamoto Motoyanagi, the matter was hastily settled. To this day, the only ones who are still pursuing this matter are those who are unwilling to accept the death of their relatives, as well as some members of the 10th Squad. Matsumoto Rangaku seems to be one of them. As the vice team, she was the minister of testing who participated in the internship for this exhibition. However, due to her own strength, her value to Seraite, and Shiba Ishin's interference, she was exempted from punishment. But, strictly speaking, Moyu lowered his eyes slightly, and said calmly, "In this matter, I am just a victim. If I hadn't borrowed some artifacts from Chishiro in advance, I'm afraid even you would be sent to the land of death." Hearing this, Matsumoto Rangaku was momentarily at a loss for words, only feeling a little stuffy in his chest. What is this called? Don't you care about your own safety at all? Or are you obsessed with sending me to the place of death? But although Moyu's words are a bit harsh, they are actually the truth. However, as a student, he also had problems in the previous soul burial practice. Things were not so simple. The death of the direct line of the Kuchiki family will definitely set off a storm in Seraite. It seems that Matsumoto Rangaku's serious thoughts can be seen. Moyu glanced at it and explained, "Don't think too much, in fact, I just want to rule out a possibility for you. From the time you knocked around me many times, I can see that you absolutely have thoughts on me." As soon as these words came out, Matsumoto Rangaku's eyes widened, and he almost poked his finger on the black forehead. "What pig talk are you talking about? The big sister has a beautiful face and countless suitors, how could she have any thoughts about you, a little devil?" "You." Just as she was about to explode, she heard Moyu continue. "Don't get me wrong, I have no idea about you either. I just removed the suspicion about myself from this matter." After the voice fell, Matsumoto Rangaku, who was a little excited, suddenly calmed down. "Sure enough, you saw my purpose." Moyu picked up the teacup on the table, took a sip, moistened his throat, and said casually, "Before the soul burial practice, I went to borrow the artifact from Yushiro. During the soul burial practice, there was not even a single injury. Judging from these 2 points alone, I am the one who is most suspected." He wasn't surprised that Matsumoto Rangaku suspected this on himself. Unfortunately, Matsumoto Rangaku is missing the most crucial information: motive for committing the crime. However, without some knowledge of Aizen's intelligence, it would be impossible to pinpoint the culprit. After all, such an event shocked the Soul Society. Who would have thought that this was just an experiment by Aizen? There may be other purposes, but those are not what they can know. Since you have finished what I want to say. Matsumoto Rangaku stood up, looking down at Moyu. Looking at the peak in front of him, Moyu suddenly realized that Matsumoto Rangaku is still extremely oppressive from this angle. "Then, please answer me." Matsumoto Rangaku's gaze was oppressive, and gradually Moyu, after all, stared into his eyes. "What do you know about the soul burial practice, Black Jade?" Moyu suddenly realized that the guy in front of him who, made an inch, was already very close to him. The light panting breath can even be felt. Looking at the face within reach, the corners of Moyu's mouth twitched slightly. Why, the women he meets are more troublesome than each other. In order to get the information he wanted from him, Matsumoto Rangaku even risked his life. If this is a little careless, I am afraid it will fall into his hands. Moyu stepped back subconsciously, and warned. Rangaku, I'm a victim, don't. Matsumoto Rangaku was unmoved by the warning. Moyu takes a step back, she takes a step further. Just when the two are maintaining this posture. Boom. Kuchiki Moyu. The door of the room was suddenly pushed open. The petite figure stood at the door and shouted inside. Here's Master Yoruichi's. Before Sui Feng finished speaking, she saw the scene in the room that made her blush. Moyu huddled on the sofa, trying to back away. Matsumoto Rangaku kept approaching him with a superior posture, almost pressing on Moyu. The crimson color on Sui Feng's earlobes spread to his delicate cheeks at a speed far exceeding his shunpos. You too. Looking at the two people who were almost stuck together, Sui Feng's brain almost lost the ability to think. It turned out that they avoided me because they had such a private matter. If I saw this scene, would I be directly silenced by the two of them? No, I haven't found any trace of Yoruichi-sama, I must not die here. Hug, sorry, Sui Feng stammered, excuse me. Immediately, she slammed the door shut and fled. Boom. There was another loud bang, and the emperor's dust fell on the door frame. Moyu and Matsumoto Rangaku looked slightly startled. After a short period of blankness, they looked at each other. Ahem, I think you should get off me first. Moyu coughed twice, breaking the silence. Facing such a scene, Matsumoto Rangaku looked relaxed and left Kuroyu's body. However, his fair neck had already become very rosy in silence. Apparently, the scene just now seemed to be somewhat beyond her expectations. Matsumoto Rangaku, who seems to have a bold personality, pays more attention to some aspects. However, what happened just now was obviously just an accident. Moyu, I believe this matter has nothing to do with you. Matsumoto Rangaku quickly adjusted his mentality, looked at Moyu again, and said seriously. However, my gut tells me that you definitely know something that other people don't. If the time is right, please let me know. After all, before Moyu could respond, she left in a hurry in the room. Looking at his leaving back, Moyu suddenly felt a headache. A woman's sixth sense, or intuition, is too scary, right? Matsumoto Rangaku found out about the secret of the soul burial practice. After that guy Sui Feng found traces of Shihuin Yoruichi. Also, doesn't that stupid cat know how to restrain its whereabouts in this world? Is this still the former commander of the covert mobile unit, or Flash Goddess? Bah, shame on you. Thinking of these, Moyu let out a long breath, feeling that life is boring and there is no fun at all. Why, there are so many problems waiting for me to solve. Just when he was about to lie back on the sofa like a salted fish, suddenly, as if a spring had been pressed, he started in fifth gear and disappeared into the room in an instant. And the door of the house, which had been devastated, fell to the ground with a clatter after he went out. Really hyphenation point break out. There is no other reason, just because Moyu suddenly remembered that Nailu was still wandering around in the warehouse. Sui Feng just ran out from him, if the two meet. Moyu shook his head violently, not daring to imagine what might happen next. If an accident really happens, the second team will have to change to a new captain. From the beginning to the end, he never worried about Nailu's safety. On the contrary, if Sui Feng, who is at the bottom of the captain's strength, really shows his hand to knee, then it must be a disaster. Even if Nailu has not fully recovered now, if her life is really in danger, it is not impossible to grow up instantly. After all, now her Reiatsu is more than enough to last a long time in battle. Vasto Lord Class Arankar, one of the strongest in the virtual circle. With Sui Feng's strength, it's all about delivering food. However, just as Moyu rushed out of Setsuna's room, a pillar of emerald green light broke through the sky, directly penetrated the ceiling of the warehouse, and went straight to the cloud at the end. After all, it's still a step too late. Moyu recognized that the owner of Reiatsu was Nailu. That Sui Feng guy definitely thinks it's a wild Ajuka's Arankar. He didn't dare to delay, and disappeared in place at the fastest speed, and came to the place where Reiatsu's beam of light appeared. In the empty field, a strong beam of light visible to the naked eye swept everything around. The walls collapsed, the ground roared, and the dust billowed, obscuring the scene within. Sui Feng stared blankly at the scene in front of him, his mouth opened slightly, and his pupils shrank to the size of a pinprick. No matter how much she thought about it, she never guessed that there was such a terrifying Manos Grande hidden in the present Shinigami stronghold. On her finger, there is a small golden blade attached, as if Shikai has been performed. Law-abiding, Sui Feng, when he saw Shu, would definitely strike directly. In her opinion, Nailu's lovely appearance is a disguise of Manos Grande, a way of predation that lures the spirits closer. Faced with this kind of existence, beheading her is my duty. However, when she was overwhelmed by Reiatsu, killing intent enveloped the opponent. Sudden mutation. The spirit Li Dehao of Ultimate was so terrifying that it exploded from the opponent's young body. Form a huge and frightening beam of light, straight into the sky. Seeing this scene, Sui Feng was dumbfounded on the spot. Facing such a powerful Reiatsu, she couldn't even conceive the idea of making a move on him. The two are not on the same level at all. However, when Moyu appeared, he stood directly in front of her and suppressed the overwhelming Reiatsu. Looking at his familiar yet unfamiliar back, Sui Feng suddenly realized something. Moyu's Reiatsu is already so strong. After he completely suppressed Nailu's Reiatsu, Sui Feng felt a sense of security being protected by others. This special feeling has never been felt since she became the captain of the second team. Sui Feng bit his lower lip lightly, looked at Moyu's back with extremely complicated eyes, and said nothing. Moyu didn't know what was going on in Sui Feng's mind. Right now, he has more important things to deal with. Stimulated by Sui Feng's killing intent, Nailu aroused her own strength. This outbreak of Reiatsu will definitely attract the attention of others. Therefore, in order to avoid more troubles, Moyu must cover up his Reiatsu as quickly as possible. However, just as his Reiatsu will cover Setsuna with Nailu's Reiatsu as well. The Reiatsu beam of light in the open space not far away suddenly faded away. The dust gradually receded. Moyu, it seems to be discerning. Come Moyu's Reiatsu ni. The cheerful voice came from it. Before Moyu could react, a green figure flew in front of him and pounced on him. Bang! The two figures disappeared in front of Sui Feng. Moyu didn't even have time to react. A green light flashed before his eyes, followed by a huge impact from his chest. During Setsuna, Moyu disappeared directly from the spot and flew behind him. Rumble! The deafening roar directly penetrated the entire warehouse. As a result, a large number of buildings collapsed directly, dust was flying, bricks and stones were scattered, and warehouses were turned into ruins. Moyu's temporary home was destroyed because of this. Nailu, who has recovered her original strength, has no idea how strong her destructive power is at this moment. She just wanted to share with Moyu the joy of recovering her memory, but this collision almost killed Moyu. The powerful impact acted on his chest cavity. Moyu's first feeling was a broken rib. This time, it was comparable to Nailu's full blow. Sui Feng looked at the scene in front of him, his pupils shrank suddenly, and subconsciously thought that it was the Arankar that had launched an attack on Moyu. Moyu! Without hesitation, she ran directly in the direction of Moyu's flight. Paula! Sui Feng had just arrived at the place where Moyu Reiatsu was, when he saw an arm protruding from the ruins, lifting a huge stone. Cough, cough, cough. Moyu leaned out from it, looking a bit embarrassed. Nailu, let go. If you try harder, I will die here. It never occurred to him that the most serious injury he suffered was actually caused by Nailu's contradicting. Throwing it into his arms directly caused 3 of his ribs to be broken, and his internal organs were also damaged. However, what he didn't expect was another harvest. Your body feels fragile due to the heavy blow, so you start to work hard and become stronger rapidly. After the system notification tone fell, Moyu's injury still slowly healed. And this is what surprised him. Shinigami is different from Shu, because the self-healing ability is far less than Shu, let alone those Arankar, so Kaido was developed. And this is exactly the fundamental gap in the body. But now, Moyu can perceive the subtle changes in himself. The body is getting stronger bit by bit. Although the degree of strengthening is very subtle, it can still be clearly perceived. If it accumulates for a long time, maybe Shu Moyu can also have a virtual body. High-speed regeneration, steel skin, super neural probe. It doesn't seem like a loss. Moyu muttered in his heart. It wasn't until Nilu's voice came from in front of him that he interrupted his beautiful fantasy about the future. Thanks to Moyu, I was able to recover. Even though she changed back to her original girlish appearance, Nilu is still very attached to Moyu's smell. She leaned in front of Moyu, hearing the steady and powerful heartbeat, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Moyu's protection kept me alive in the forest of Manos Grande, and brought me back to the present world. As she said that, Nilu suddenly raised her head and said seriously, I want to repay you. Ever since, she stood up suddenly. The great scenery, sunlight is unreservedly presented in front of Moyu. Because of the change in her body, Nilu's blue coat that could completely cover her body turned into a short jacket that could only cover her chest and the lower half of her damaged clothes. After he stood up, Moyu only felt that there were white flowers in front of his eyes, and there were indeed some springs. I saw Nilu holding the short sword and looking seriously at Sui Feng, who arrived here. Cruel woman, I will never allow you to hurt Moyu. Sui Feng immediately froze in place, with a dazed look on his face. It seems that something is not going right. Why, that Arankar stood up to protect Moyu. Also, how could I be a perpetrator? Moyu was also a little stunned. Before he opened his mouth to stop him, he saw Nilu turn around and smile at him. The next moment, his figure was in front of Sui Feng. The short sword held high, slashed down. When caught off guard, Sui Feng only had time to raise the palm attached to Suzumaki and barely blocked the blow. However, a powerful force came from above, which immediately changed his expression. Boom! Sui Feng backed up, plowed a deep ditch on the ground, and flew hundreds of meters away. She looked at Nilu with a calm expression in shock, never expecting that the other party could burst out with such terrifying power. Only in melee combat, she has already suffered a crushing defeat. If this is just the opponent's tentative attack, Sui Feng reckons that even if he activates instant coaxing, he will not be able to survive from the opponent. Just when Nilu was about to attack again. Stop, Nello. Moyu's voice came from behind her, causing Nilu's movements to stop abruptly in the air. In a chic maneuver, she landed on one knee, her movements extremely smooth and smooth. Sui Feng is not an enemy. Moyu flew out of the ruins, releasing the green Kaido light from his palm, repairing the injury caused by Ni's bump. Although the body's recovery ability has become stronger, it may take a while to recover by itself. Still not as fast as Kaido. It's all a misunderstanding. Moyu walked up to the two and stopped the tense atmosphere. Seeing Moyu's arrival, Sui Feng subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief, and was no longer wary of Nilu. And this change, even she herself did not notice. Unknowingly, Sui Feng seems to have developed an instinctive trust in Moyu. Moyu glanced over the two and sighed. Things are a bit complicated, why don't we sit down? He looked at the Shinigami stronghold that was completely in ruins, and his expression froze again. The damage to the warehouse forced Moyu to place the conversation on the roof not far from the Shinigami stronghold. There is a nice plus here. Well, the field of vision is very open. Let's explain Nilu's existence first. Moyu pulled Nilu, who had been snuggling by his side, over and was about to introduce him. A burst of smoke suddenly rises from its body, rising. Wait until the smoke clears. Ah, Nilu stretched out her little hand, her expression blank. Nilu has transformed back. Moyu looked at Nilu seriously, and discovered a fact through the Reiatsu she radiated. It seems that Nilu's current state is not stable because she swallowed a lot of Reiatsu. If it is forcibly restored to its original form, it may become smaller again at any time. Do not worry. Moyu rubbed Nilu's emerald green hair, and comforted, when Nilu Reiatsu recovers completely, you should be able to change back. However, Nilu squeezed into his arms, smiled happily and said, Nilu prefers the way she is now. Because then I can stay in Moyu's arms. Seeing his happy face, for some reason, Sui Feng felt envious in his heart. Moyu rubbed his hair again, looked up at Sui Feng, and continued. Her name is Nilu, and I brought her back from Hawako Mundo. You should be very clear about the increase in the number of ghosts in the world. When it comes to business, Sui Feng's attitude is quite correct. Well, but the area around Karakura town under your jurisdiction is actually the most efficient one. Before Si Dag came to the world, Sui Feng obviously had an understanding of basic information. I have considered the problem of a large number of fictions pouring into the world. But I found that this kind of meaningless thinking is not enough to solve the current problem at all. Moyu nodded, and continued calmly. At this point, considering where Hugh should be, I decided to go to Hueco Mundo to investigate. And Nailu is what I brought back from Hueco Mundo. At that time, she was being hunted down by a large number of ghosts. Speaking of this, he just didn't continue talking. Because, speaking further, Moyu was worried that his words could not hide from Sui Feng's eyes. As the captain of the second team, Sui Feng's strength may be slightly weaker. But in terms of the means of some dark side missions, it is definitely one of the best in Lingting. All kinds of interrogation and questioning are not a problem at all. This also led to few people being able to lie in front of her. After all, Sui Feng has already mastered the skill of detecting whether he is lying or not based on subtle movements. And Sui Feng also stared at Moyu with scorching eyes, observing his every move. To Sui Feng's surprise, what Moyu said did not contain any lies. After a while, Sui Feng resumed his original stern demeanor, and calmly said, I understand. Nailu is not within the scope of my mission. Sui Feng hesitated for a moment, then continued, also, I won't interfere with the matter between you and Rengoku. Having said that, Yu suddenly widened his eyes. What pig talk are you talking about? What's the thing about me and Rengoku? There's nothing wrong between me and that girl with breasts, okay? You are slandering. Just when he was about to refute, Sui Feng's expression changed slightly, and he looked at him extremely unwillingly, saying, So, can you tell me about Shihuen Yoruichi's track? Moyu was silent. For a while, he was a little difficult to respond. Seeing that he didn't speak, Sui Feng continued with his eyes slightly downcast. Not long ago, I found a few fallen black cat gold in the warehouse. I can tell that it's definitely Shihuen Yoruichi's cat hair. Hearing this, Moyu's eyes widened again. Is this the captain of the second squad? Isn't this investigative ability too outrageous? You can find random cat's hairs, what else can you not find? Moreover, you can actually judge the identity of a cat from its fur. It's just off the charts. So, Sui Feng approached Moyu suddenly, so close that he almost fell his head on Nailu's body. Her nostrils fluttered slightly, and a light flashed in her eyes. Really? Sui Feng raised his head, and fixed his eyes on Moyu with unwillingness to be outdone. Although you smell a lot of women. But there is definitely a Shihuen Yoruichi smell. Moyu was completely shocked. I know, what kind of ghosts are these? Pakai, Saraite picked up a ghost. Sui Feng directly used practical actions to prove his professional ability. This industry, his service ability is simply a model of the captain, and he can be called the existence of the best captain. Although that's what it says. Moyu coughed lightly and said, but can you get off of me first? You and Nailu are together, a little bored. Hearing this, Sui Feng's cheeks flushed, and he left Moyu like an electric shock, and kept a certain distance away. Well, what about Yoruichi guy? Moyu pondered, it's not that I don't want to tell you her whereabouts. Just because she has more important things to do. And this matter concerns the safety of the Soul Society and even the Three Realms. So, I cannot reveal her whereabouts to you. Sui Feng stared at Moyu again with extremely focused eyes, but to her disappointment, what Dengyu said was actually the truth. And Moyu also saw a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Victory, after all, is on my side. From the beginning to the end, when he communicated with Sui Feng, what he said was not mixed with any lies. It's just a slight change in the truth. However, I think I can help a little. Sui Feng said eagerly. When talking about Shihuen Yoruichi, Sui Feng lost himself with blind worship. As the saying goes, worship is the emotion furthest from understanding. At this point, Moyu's eyes gradually became flat, and he swept across Sui Feng, and said softly. Even Nailu couldn't resist a blow. Can you really help Yoruichi? Hearing this, Sui Feng suddenly froze in place, his eyes immediately lost color. So, is the problem here? Weakness is the original sin. Moyu's words, like the tip of a knife, sank into Sui Feng's heart. Yoruichi left without saying goodbye, not just because of the urgency of the situation. His calm eyes fell on the unbalanced Sui Feng. More importantly, she doesn't want to put those around her in danger. Do you understand, Sui Feng? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.